Victoria, is everything all right? People talk or say things.
Hello?
Why didn't you tell me it was out of order? I suppose you think that's funny.
I'm not allowed out the front door.
Who says you weren't?
Them.
Who?
Them.
It was terrible out there. I could hear breathing.
We told you.
Are you worried about the man?
They hate us. That's the truth. They want to kill and torture every one of us. You can see it in their eyes.
Come now, Frederick. Do you dream about unholy things?
I really don't know what's going on here. There's something wrong, and that's a fact.
Wait. What did you dream last night? This manifestation of evil. You must be delivered from evil.
Brown-haired albino was unbuttoning his coat, his eyes on Cermak, who was shaking hands with Roosevelt.
Well, it's wonderful to see you, Tony. A lovely gesture.
I just wanted to remind you and your administration that you have my full and enthusiastic support.
The albino assassin was reaching under his coat, but I grabbed his arm and pulled it away, and his hand came back empty, the gun still under his arm as his coat flapped. I buried a fist in his belly and doubled him over. And when he came up, the snout of my 9mm stared him in the face.
You got you this time, fucker!
Sounded like firecrackers, and the muzzle flash above the crowd looked like fireworks, but this was something else. Blurred figures in the crowd were falling, and a stubby, bushy-haired brown little man in a white shirt standing up on a bench was swarmed like a come-to-Jesus meeting got out of hand. Meanwhile, the ex-blonde was pulling away, and I swung at him, and he went down, unconscious, as the mass of people around us were heading to my right. I moved against the tide towards Cermak, pushing, shoving, and got to that touring car where Miller and Lang were crouched over the fallen Cermak, red spreading from his left side under his unbuttoned suit coat.
Where? Where were the goddamn bodyguards?
I had the blonde, Your Honor. He didn't fire the round. Some bushy-haired little creep.
This was no time to tell him he'd been shot by his son-in-law's gardener.
What the hell? They got me after all, Heller.
The crowd was turning into a mob. Miller, Lang, and I were hovering over Cermak in the quiet of the storm.
Heller, get your people out of the way. We need to move the president and his vehicle out of here.
For Christ's sakes, Cermak's been shot. Take him with you. Get him to a hospital.
Roosevelt, sitting in back, heard me.
Put Tony in here and get us the hell out.
The shooter's big revolver was clicking on an empty chamber now. But that must have had an 8-round rod, as I found myself on a battlefield where bleeding audience members wandered like wounded warriors, helped by their dazed loved ones.
Although edited for television, tonight's thriller contains scenes of suspense and violence which may be unsuitable for young viewers. Parental discretion is advised.
Robservations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema. You know, that's me right there. Your evangelist of the imagination, and of course, the perhaps never to be defined existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, moi. Robert Meyer Burnett, and I'm, of course, Robcasting from the Robservatory to you. You imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is Robservations episode 1053. It's another night of viewer letters on the... you guys, you haven't let me down. Since I just opened up the floodgates, I got people writing me every day. You're putting fingers to keyboard. I'd like to say you're putting pen to paper, but no one even knows what paper and pens are these days. So you just got your keyboards, you got clattering away, and you're sending me some great stuff. Now, the Sydney Sweeney, there's a lot of people with thoughts on this, but I did get a very serious letter that I thought that I should discuss. And after reading it, I realized that I perhaps didn't have the overarching perspective needed to comment, to opine enough about the letter that was sent in. So I brought in a ringer, my business partner and good friend Mike Boden, who I'm going to bring on after I read the letter to talk about the letter that I am about to read to you. Now, first of all, I don't know why it is I engender such trust from you guys. I mean, you guys really pour your hearts out to me, and sometimes, I sometimes don't know what to do. I don't want to, make light of anyone's opinions. So sometimes you just need to bring in somebody to help you, to make sure that the letter writer is well served. So I'm going to start, and I'm going to read the letter. Then I'm going to bring in Mike Boden. And the reason I wanted to bring in Mike Boden is he used to be a madman. He was in the advertising game. He knows a lot about branding. He knows a lot about marketing. He had some perspectives that I hadn't considered just talking to him about this. So I'm going to bring him in, but I'm going to read this letter first. And it comes to us from the Sane Corner. That's right, the Sane Corner, which kind of means that there's an insane corner too, which I'll leave that up for you all to decide. But here is the letter coming to us from the Sane Corner. From the exam room, why a great genes joke doesn't land in a world full of scars. I am a male nurse and a sexual assault nurse examiner. My work happens in small fluorescent rooms where jokes are the last thing on anyone's mind. So when an ad tells me Sydney Sweeney has great genes, then pivots to a genetics riff about blue eyes before correcting to denim, I don't hear a clever pun. I hear the echo of a culture that spent generations grading women's bodies and calling it taste, science, or sales. The campaign's own video invites the biology frame, genes are passed down, even eye color. My genes are blue. And then winks. Survivors don't wink back. Let me translate what happened through a trauma lens. 1. A pun can be an MRI of power. When ad copy steers the audience to think genes while showcasing a blonde, blue-eyed archetype, it doesn't just sell pants. It brushes against eugenics baggage, ugly history, wrapped in a good-breeding compliment. That's not activist overreach, it's the criticism many viewers named, and major outlets documented the Eugenics Association voiced online. In clinic, I see how ideal bodies become measuring sticks that hurt everybody else. Ads that flirt with genetic goodness, tug on a log thread of exclusion, and survivors feel those pulls in their nervous systems. True, too. Trauma has a memory like denim, durable and hard-wearing. Marketers will say button pushing is the point. Disruption breaks through noise. NPR's interview with a brand strategist admits it. People remember the edge, especially for commodity products like jeans. But the edge cuts the people we patch up after the culture normalizes staring, grading, and grabbing. Provocation doesn't land on a blank slate. It lands on bodies with history. And yes, we've seen this playbook. The AP drew a line to Brooke Shields' 1980 Calvin Klein controversy. Sexualized imagery, a young arresting figure, and a double entendre. Yesterday's edgy is today's deja vu. 3. Context is a co-star whether brands cast it or not. The same week media were asking if this signals a broader drift away from the inclusive ads many companies embraced post-2020, this campaign leaned hard into a singular aesthetic. That's not neutral. It reads as a pendulum swings survivors feel in waiting rooms and comment sections alike. Number 4, because marketing can't cauterize a mixed message. American Eagle says a limited edition Sydney gene will raise awareness of domestic violence with proceeds to crisis counseling. USA Today goes further, noting 100% of the purchase price for that gene will be donated to Crisis Text Line. I'm glad for any funding that gets more people to help faster. But in clinic, we call this a paradox. The same creativity that triggers some survivors is asked to bankroll their support. That's not a cancelable offense. It's a solvable misalignment. 5. What a trauma-informed ad would do differently. Own the setup, diversify the punchline. If you're going to play with genes, don't lock it to one phenotype. One AP-quoted marketing scholar suggested the obvious fix: multiple faces, multiple bodies, same wordplay. It dilutes the hierarchy and the harm. Match the cause to the creative. If the gene funds crisis support, make the story about autonomy and safety from the jump, not about good genes and the gays. The gap between message and mission is where survivors flinch. Stress test with people who carry the stress. Before launch, sit down with survivors, advocates, and trauma-trained clinicians. Listen for the tripwires we hear every day, because the internet will hear them too. For what it's worth, NPR notes the company and publicist didn't respond to their request for comment. Listening earlier would have been better for everyone. 6. Why this matters beyond one billboard. Every exam I do is a reminder that culture sets the stage for violence long before a crime. It scripts whose bodies are visible, valuable, touchable. Ads aren't crimes, but they're not harmless either. They train our reflexes, where the camera lingers, whose features we praise, what good looks like. When brands lean on old hierarchies to win attention, they spend women's nervous systems as the currency. So no, I don't think Sydney Sweeney is the villain of anyone's story. I think a system chose a familiar shorthand and told itself it was a joke. From where I sit, next to a box of tissues and a chain of custody form, the joke has a long clinical history. And if you're still wondering why survivors are tired, try reading the tagline, Under Hospital Lights. I love your work and insight. Best regards, Sean. Now, obviously, this was a pretty intense letter. And I was very surprised that an ad would be tied into this, but it speaks to much larger issues in our society. And I think I'm going to bring in my buddy, my good friend, my pal, Mr. Mike Boden, because he is in marketing and he has worked in advertising and he knows a lot about brand management. So please put your hands together. We can hear it, you know. Mr. Mike Boden. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hey, Rob. Good to see you. We talk all the time on the phone. I very rarely get a chance to see you there in the Robservatory unless I'm watching a replay of a stream, because you're usually on when I'm in bed, you know. So
well, it's true. You know, when I got this letter, I told you about it, and I figured, you know, sometimes when I talk on the show, I don't want to sell people short when they send me very heartfelt letters, and I felt to bring you on would be beneficial, and that you could speak to this. So I sent you the letter, and you told me you actually read it a number of times before. And what do you think? I mean, I felt a little uncomfortable with this letter, and at first I was going to jump back and say, hey, I think you're drawing a line. I think you're going a little far with this, because sometimes a kiss is just a kiss, a cigar is just a cigar, and Occam's razor says the simplest explanation is usually the best one, and that would be it's just an advertisement, not an indictment of culture.
So I guess what comes to mind to me is, first off, I think it's important that we acknowledge the work that Shane does and the value
100%.
and the importance of the work that he does. And he provides, I think, an interesting perspective on this campaign that can, I think, be translated in a larger sense to a lot of what we see as commercial messaging in the media today, whether it's an outdoor board or an Instagram post or a streaming video or television commercial or a trailer for a movie. However, I think his letter also, to me anyway, as someone who's worked in advertising and public relations for 40 years, it also points out how a lot of people aren't able to draw a distinction between a commercial message like an ad and the things that they view and are entertained by that may include maybe an artistic message or a social message with it. Now, that's not to say that some advertising can't provide a social message as well, but I think the thing we have to keep in mind is that when we talk about advertising, we talk about marketing. And to a large extent, when we talk about publicity and public relations, those messages and those efforts are all intended to drive a certain kind of behavior from the people that are exposed to them. And most importantly, they're really intended for a subset of the general population who would be inclined to make the purchase or take on the action that that the corporate entity that's paying for the message wants to see happen. So in that regard, there's a fundamental difference between an ad we see inside a television program and the television program itself. The TV program we're supposed to be entertained by the writer or the director or the performers or the producers have a message that they want to deliver, something in addition to the entertainment value that's derived. But there's no question when you're watching an ad, they want you to buy something, or they want you to vote a certain way, or they want you to go somewhere on a certain date, or they want you to stay in school, or they want you to support the crisis text line and help survivors of sexual assault or sexual abuse. Those are all all those messages are intended to change a person's behavior, not entertain them. So there's a fundamental difference here. There's also, and in my view, one of the things that this points out is that there's an ongoing need to make sure that we as consumers of media are informed and are able to make good decisions and these things that we see and that we watch and that we hear, so that we can put them into context for us. When we were initially talking about this whole campaign, one of the things I said is, make no doubt about it, there was no intention on the part of American Eagle to find a way to sell eugenics or ideology. That's not good for business. It's completely off brand for them. It's off strategy for them. In fact, the only thing that they're looking for is to see whether or not this campaign drives the sale of their denim product.
So you're saying, wait, I want to get this straight now, and I agree with you, but it is American Eagle. You do their brand itself is very, could be seen as a nationalist kind of a brand. I mean, you could put American Eagle on anything.
If you only look at the name and you don't have any history with the brand, you could certainly, I think, make an association between what we see as people who are kind of flag waving and adopting this pro-America, America First ideology and try to make some kind of relationship. However, that's not the history of American Eagle.
Right.
It took me 10 minutes to do some research. Okay. So I don't think we're asking people to make a big lift here to really understand what's going on. American Eagle Outfitters started off as really as an extension of a retail department chain that was founded by a guy who wanted to find a way to create a new retail store inside shopping malls across America. Okay. And he wanted to do something that had, kind of almost a J. Peterman type feel. The original American Eagle Outfitters sold camping gear, and they sold backpacks, and they sold things like that. Eventually, they got more into clothing, specifically denim and jeans, to eventually become, after Levi Strauss and some of those brands, one of the top selling denim brands in the United States. However, American Eagle has had a number of efforts that some have worked, some have not. The strategy of launching a number of stores, I think they had at one point over 800 stores around the world, selling the American Eagle Outfitter brand of attire or whatever. But the problem is that the shopping mall curve has come to an abrupt halt over the last. years. There are
Certainly
no more shopping
has.
malls being built, and occupancy rates in shopping malls are going down. It's a real problem, to the point where American Eagle at the start of this year, I think, was down 5% in sales over where the year before. And this is where we get into why would they do this campaign with Sydney Sweeney and talk about great jeans and all this kind of stuff. American Eagle Outfitters, it really focuses on the 15 3-year-old adult as their main audience, and they need to find spokespeople who are kind of inside that window or close to that window. Sydney Sweeney is the same age as my youngest son, who actually Sydney at the studio school. So I've even met Sydney and had dinner with her. She's a nice gal, and not political. At least she certainly wasn't when I was talking with her and her mom about everything.
No, people had to look in. They were looking into finding out. They took pictures. She's from Spokane, Washington, which is in eastern Washington.
Yeah.
And you heard people. They got pictures of her at a birthday party or something, or somebody was wearing a Blue Lives Matter shirt, and they're like going after her. Well, Mike,
get this though, Rob. You want to know why American Eagle went after her? Because she's 27. She's a little older than the demo, but she looks like she fits in the demo, right? But the reason they went after her, she's an American Eagle Outfitters customer. She really does buy their product and wear their jeans, and talks about it in a lot of the other brand deals that she's done. So they saw that, and they reached out to her, and they said, "Hey, can we do a deal with you?" Conditions that she put in there, according to what I've read and the research that I've done, was this idea that she would get to design a jean that would, the net proceeds of which, not every dollar sold, but the net proceeds of which would go support this crisis text line. Not been introduced yet. It's actually tied into her upcoming biopic about a female boxer who is sexually assaulted and who has to deal with this program. And the biopic is about that struggle. So there is a kind of a brain time in here that, I totally agree with Shane. I don't think it's necessarily explained very well, and it hasn't been handled very well. But I do think that what we are seeing is we're seeing an initial, the launch of a campaign that's done exactly what American Eagle absolutely grabbed people's attention. Some of it good, some of it not good, but it doesn't matter. It's getting people to pay attention. Now, the real question is, will it sell jeans, and how will American Eagle Outfitters continue to react to what they are seeing and what they're hearing, not from angry TikTokers or pissed off tweeters or people posting to Facebook, but what are they going to hear from the 2,000 customers that they're in constant contact with every time they come out with a new product idea or a new campaign idea and ask their opinion before it gets launched? They probably did with this campaign with Sydney Sweeney. I think that one of the things that Shane mentioned here is, I think he talked about an AP quoted marketing scholar suggesting including more people. They've already started dropping more images of other people from other that are representative, demographic groups in their ads. But
let me ask you this: don't you think? Like, I thought that it was obvious that they would follow up with all different kinds of people.
I think they would, because it honestly, that actually does play into what they're talking about with that demographic that they're focusing on, the 15 to 23-year-old. It is about inclusivity. It is about finding ways to include more people. But you know what? That demographic loves euphoria. They love what Sydney Sweeney's doing, and Sydney Sweeney's only going to just going to do what she does really well. She is an attractive gal who understands what she's doing. She's coming out now with her own line of lingerie. She's got a lot of other deals in the works that are going to probably even be more provocative than this series of ads for American Eagle Outfitters, and good for her. This is good. All of Sweeney brand. And I'll give you an example. If you look on the American Eagle Outfitters Twitter or Instagram page, and you take a look at the posts that they put up, posts featuring nondescript people, great-looking young men and young women showing off the clothes. Those posts are getting anywhere from 500 likes. Every Sydney Sweeney post gets anywhere from 18,000 to 65,000 likes.
Well,
That's
I mean,
the difference.
Yeah, and that's what they're going for. And Sydney Sweeney, I mean, she's been in Handmaid's Tale. She was in a horror movie about nuns.
Yeah.
She's got quite a diverse. I mean, wasn't she murdered in Handmaid's Tale?
Oh,
yeah. Well, so
she was actually traumatized. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Here's what I have to ask you too, and not that I found it really interesting that, to me, genes and genes is just sort of a play on words, and the whole thing about people passing down. I mean, brothers and sisters pass down genes. I mean, my sister took my old jeans and cut them up and put patches on them. So family members.
Sydney Sweeney's wearing men's jeans in the ads.
Yeah, I mean, and so to me, the genes thing, it was interesting that it was just, to me, a play on words, but I found it fascinating that some TikTokers and some, people online decided to equate it with eugenics. Mm-hmm. Of course, a lot of people, they can barely name the capitals of the states, much less geography. People, you see these videos, somebody randomly goes up and, where's the Atlantic Ocean? And people don't know. Who did we win our freedom from in 1776? They don't know. And yet, online, suddenly people are talking about eugenics programs and suddenly became an expert on the late 19th century and the 20th century ideals of genetics and how the Ubermensch, suddenly the Nazis were trying to create the master race, and suddenly everybody's an expert on the historical uses of eugenics in our country and around the world. That, to me, didn't ring true at all. I'm like, no. Where did this come from? Like, when did somebody decide to point the finger and go, let's talk about eugenics? I mean, when I hear eugenics, as everybody who watches this channel knows, the first thing that comes to my mind is, of course, the eugenics wars of the 1990s, where Khan, Nooney, and Singh and a number of genetic supermen that were created with eugenics programs begun in World War II captured half or a quarter of the world. You remember when Khan, Nooney, and Singh ran
I remember when he did that. Absolutely.
Yeah, and then, of course, he fled to space and disappeared. We don't know whatever happened to the guy. But when I hear about eugenics, I think about the eugenics wars. I mean, that's the first thing that comes to mind. But all of these people suddenly, especially, girls with blue hair and nose rings and everything, they suddenly became experts. And Doja Cat developed a southern twangy accent somehow. I don't know. And it's just, where did that come from? Where do you think?
I thought maybe that was the Spokane drawl. Right?
I guess that was what it was. I've been to Spokane and I don't recall anyone speaking quite like that. Although it is close to Coeur d'Alene, which does in fact have real Nazis. So I was looking into that. But where do you think this idea of eugenics, suddenly people delved into the history books and do you think that, I mean, I have to believe that a lot of these controversies that spring up on the internet, that people are looking to do it. Like, that's a stretch to me.
Well, outrage is a great way to get clicks, and it's a great way to build your own personal brand. I think the thing we have to remember is that just like we're doing this interview and possibly subscribe to your channel or come back and visit again, and that there's a marketable value to that. That's the same thing that everyone who is opining about the subject online, whether it's a Fox News host or whether it's someone who's posted something as a Facebook reel. So they have.
We're losing you. Our connection's not the greatest, just so you know. I don't know why. It's like cycling somehow, and your audio goes off. I don't know.
So, trust me, the ideas are much more firmly baked than maybe they're coming across at the moment. But the thing is, outrage sells. And there are two schools of thought here. One is controversy because it's good for their business or whatever. I remember there was a website that Ashley Madison for homosexual affairs or whatever, and they which was immediately turned down.
Yeah, Mike, we're really losing you.
They turned around and they
hang on. We're really losing you because this is really an interesting point. I don't know why. Let me zap you out and have you come back in. Yeah, because you're not. So weird. I'm just gonna zap you out and come back in. Just come right back in. So I will. Hopefully, Mike will come back in. I'm sorry about that, but he's making some great points. So what he was talking about, Ashley Madison. Hopefully Mike will come back, reconnect. Hang on. Okay, I'm bringing him back. Hopefully, Mike, this will be a little better. So Ashley Madison, for gay men, wanted to take an ad out on the Super Bowl to have so gay men who can have an affair.
Absolutely. And they were immediately turned down. Turns out they never really had the money to pay for an ad anyway. They were just trying to get turned down so that they could then send out news releases announcing all of this and that their attempt had been shut down or whatever. And it was picked up, of course, by Fox News and by a Fox News host who then started to whip up interest because it drew viewers to their analyst show to talk about this kind of thing and how outrageous it was. And everyone was trying to basically get all of this free exposure off of not being able to run an ad on the Super Bowl. And you know, that kind of outrage marketing, that intentional attempt to stir up outrage from a media outlet perspective is it's really cheap. And if we're smart as consumers, we do the one thing that we can do when it comes to being exposed to that kind of messaging, and that's turn the channel. That's the best thing you can do. Don't push back against it. It's not going to do any good. All you're doing is you're feeding the trolls and letting them know that you're watching them. The thing to do is to flip the switch and watch something else. The second kind of outrage marketing, which is a little brilliant, but also I think kind of illicit or not in good faith, is when there are intentional campaigns designed to infuriate a certain sector of the public who can't help themselves but express their outrage. And we're seeing a little bit of that with this Sydney Sweeney campaign, not so much with the kind of the people that are complaining and claiming that it's promoting eugenics and Nazi ideology. I think a lot of people kind of look at that and they're like, what are you talking about? But by the MAGA media, in particular, social media, who are basically saying, you know, I saw one guy, I watched one video of a guy who wore his Donald Trump hat into an American Eagle Outfitters and walked up to the jeans display and said, you know, I don't even wear jeans anymore. And this is my first time in an American Eagle in 20 years, but I think I'm going to buy these socks over here and show my support for Sydney Sweeney. You know, that's not, it's not what these guys are really hoping to do. What they really want to do is they want to provide an aspirational figure of someone who loves her jeans, and they want to get more people in the store that will actually want to share in that. The people that played it well, but albeit kind of to the taking advantage of that ultra white right and white social media structure was Nike when they ran the Colin Kaepernick Super Bowl ads. And the thing that was interesting, I think, about that is that they didn't even bother buying any ad time featuring Colin Kaepernick in the Super Bowl because the 49ers weren't in the Super Bowl, and
Right.
Kaepernick wasn't even playing anymore. So instead, they bought ads around it, and it infuriated so many of the kind of ultra-right blogosphere that for the 2 weeks around the ad campaign, they generated over $800 million worth of advertising impressions. And as a result, sold over $72 million worth of additional goods. Now, that's an example. That was Wyden and Kennedy out of Oregon, though, that ran the campaign. But here's the thing, is that they knew that the audience they were going to piss off was not Nike's core audience. Old white guys, don't buy Nike's tennis shoes. But they were buying Kaepernick jerseys and Nike tennis shoes and burning them on Facebook. And all that was doing was encouraging everyone who was in the target market to go like, hey, man, I'm going to go out and get that stuff because that looks pretty slick. I like that. I'm going to go ahead and do that. So it was a brilliant move. What we saw in the Sweeney campaign so far to date is that we've seen a bump in the stock price, which some people like to claim as a sign that the campaign was working. To be perfectly honest, it's nothing more than saying the campaign succeeded in attracting a lot of attention over a short period of time. The stock price is now down to about within 5% of where it was 2 weeks ago. What's going to be interesting is to see if it stops the slide in product sales that every retailer is feeling due to tariff restrictions now and a variety of other economic factors really have much more to do with the success or failure of a retailer, no matter the political standing of the brand. Everybody is now looking at having to deal with anywhere from 10 to 35% tariffs, depending on where the material is being imported from, and of course, the people that have to pay those tariffs, by and large, are the consumers.
Us.
So you're looking at a significant price increase, and the question is, how are the retailers going to do?
And the haphazard nature of it all. Was it Sweden that got taxed or tariffed 37% or something today?
Yeah. Well, my son, my second oldest son and his wife and my two little grandsons are all heading back to Almaty, Kazakhstan, where Tim and Sarah teach. And they just found out today that now Kazakhstan has a 25% tariff on everything that is sold into the United States. I'm like, what gets sold from Kazakhstan into the United States? And my son said, our plane tickets. So sucks to be that, I told them they could stay if they wanted.
And then of course you those job reports, those job numbers. I mean, now we can't even. It's funny that I read that the guy in the Office of Statistics who reported he got fired because the numbers that they've crunched are not to the liking of the administration, so he gets fired.
So on a political side note, what we saw that President Trump issued a statement on social media, Truth Social, I think, that he wanted to call for the resignation of the director of labor statistics or whatever. And she oversees the process of putting together these employment figures and everything. And they're generally, those employment or unemployment figures are adjusted every couple months after they come out anyway, because there's always things that have to be fixed. And you and I have talked about this. I certainly have some opinions about the difference between political leadership and politicians right now. I feel we have too many politicians, not enough political leaders, but that's a whole nother conversation.
That's a different. Well, now let me ask you this. I mean, I just wanted to, before we drop this part, the whole issue of eugenics. I mean, it's been picked up, and I can't help, but there are certain. The idea of eugenics and Nazi propaganda is also been feeding into other conflicts, obviously the big one in Gaza, across the world. And I can't help but feel that there is an attempt, whether it's Qatari money behind it, do what you want, to somehow tie all of that in together because this imagery is being liberally, I say that ironically, liberally deployed across social media in many different areas. Mm-hmm. And I found it, the idea of eugenics, I mean, the funny thing about eugenics is it's not, people have in nature, the best genes win. That's how evolution within a species happens. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's why we don't have our Neanderthal. We've got Neanderthal DNA in us, some of us, but the reason that there aren't Neanderthals anymore is because their genes were weak. And then this whole idea, it's always interesting to me, like you could have used the evolution. You could have said the genes, Sydney Sweeney has good genes. She's the ultimate product of human evolution. But this idea, I mean, genetics is something that's controlled. Genetics is something that we are, and it was a very bizarre, for me, the whole thing was bizarre. And it also has something to do with beauty, that Sydney Sweeney being the it girl that she is, whether she's on Handmaid's Tale, she's in a movie with Glenn Powell, or whatever it is she's doing, that she's being punished for being beautiful. And human beings are attracted to beauty, and we have been since the dawn of time, just like we're attracted to the cooing of babies in a sunset. Mm-hmm. And it's also, there's an element of, I mean, ads, movies, media have always relied on beautiful people because that's what human beings like to see. And it's such a weird thing to me that, what, are you going to punish Sydney Sweeney for being lusted after? And by the way, let's face it, we live in a more liberal society. Women are just as apt to be attracted to other beautiful women as men are nowadays. So it's such a strange, what's going on with this?
Right. Well, if you take a look, and there are actually online resources that you can tap into as a marketer to find out who are what is the audience makeup of the Sydney Sweeney, or name your celebrity potential endorser. What is the makeup of their audience? What are their age ranges? What is their what are their other identifying markers? What makes up their identity? What are the kinds of issues that they're interested in, and that kind of thing? And you can really kind of fine tune who you want to partner with as a celebrity endorser or influencer. Sure. Using some of these resources, and that really comes down as a result of the inherent risk of hiring, especially a celebrity, a movie star, an actor, or a musician, or a sports star, to be a spokesperson for your brand. In fact, for the most part, unless the actor that you've hired is playing a role as your spokesperson, like Flo from Progressive, okay? Or Jake from Allstate, who got fired, by the way, because he took his pants from his commercial and sold them at a bar in Bloomington, Illinois. But that's a whole nother story. But when you have a celebrity endorser, you run a terrible risk of having brand competition between the brand that's hired the celebrity and the celebrity's brand himself. Now, in the case of American Eagle Outfitters and Sydney Sweeney, it seems to be a really good fit. She's actually a customer. She's actually a brand advocate before they even hired her. So that's tremendous. She's also been very strategic in how she's tried to manage her career. Controversy is not a problem for the most part with her. She is going to be more and more provocative because it is part of what her brand identity is.
Yeah, I mean, look at what her part is on Euphoria.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
absolutely. Yep. No, and really, when you think about it, in roles where maybe she hasn't done so well, is it because people saw that and went like, really, Sydney Sweeney's going to do that role? It's like, and that's a challenge. This is where there's a difference between being a movie star and being an actor, right? I mean, it's kind of like, you could hire Cary Grant to do 1,000 different movies, but he basically played Cary Grant,
right,
in those situations, right? And we all loved him for it. North by Northwest, still one of my favorite movies, because I think he, the only guy that could play a better ad man than Cary Grant in my book is John Hamm.
Yeah, just gonna say Don Draper.
Yeah, but was in the case of American Eagle Outfitters, it seems to be a really good fit. Nike, Michael Jordan, great fit for Nike, absolutely perfect fit. I think Caitlin Clark's probably going to have the same kind of success with the shoe brand she does, because there's a certain ethos in her that if they can find a brand that aligns with that, and as they find brands that align with that, it'll work out great. Michael Jackson, remember when Michael Jackson was the spokesperson for Pepsi?
Oh, yeah.
And they were recording his commercial and he lit his hair on fire. Okay, no one talked about Pepsi.
No.
That's a problem. That is a major problem. So you have, hiring celebrities to be endorsers is always risky. And American Eagle Outfitters done it before in the past, but they've hired people that are more in line with their ideal demo. So they tend to be younger, not as well known. They took a big swing in hiring Sydney to be in this campaign. And it looks like it's going to be controversial, but it looks like it may do what they need to have done, because every retailer is going to be hurting this year. And this is their Super Bowl time right now. August and September is back to school. They've got to kill it right now. It's more important than Christmas. So they've got to go, and they've got to be big.
Yeah, I think they will. So let's. I've got some super chats that have come in that are asking questions, and then also just to put an end to a button on this conversation. So you believe, and I believe that, just to be clear, that this commercial was not nefarious. It was what it was. Occam's razor. It's telling a play on words. It's a joke. It doesn't. And by the way, I thought it was fairly clever and fairly funny. And there's a long tradition of these kinds of ads. Where's the beef? I think
as an advertising creative person who's produced thousands of TV and radio commercials, there are definitely things I would have probably wanted to see done differently. But I think the choice of talent was inspired. I think it was really great. Knowing her, I think she probably was willing to do whatever it was that they needed to have done, and she would do a perfectly good job, because they made sure that they were shooting a Sydney Sweeney commercial and that they were going to make sure she was outfitted well. So I don't know. We can be critical on the execution of the ad all we want. However, I will say this, that it would benefit, I think, the brand to not put too much weight on these other comments that come in. But I think like Sean's letter, has some valid, interesting points that should be taken into consideration. I personally hope to see more aspirational pictures of people in jeans who also have great jeans from American Outfitters. I think that would be really an interesting and appropriate response. But they're not going to find, and they can't probably afford a second Sydney Sweeney. So they've got to lead with their strongest person. That being said, all the comments about Nazi propaganda and eugenics, that's just cheap baiting. That's clickbaiting on the part of people trying to get views and trying to stay relevant and trying to compete with, how do you compete with Sydney Sweeney in a jeans ad? I'm not really sure that you should even try. You know, find a better take, find a better subject. But here's the thing we have to keep in mind. From a retailer's point of view, selling eugenics and Nazi propaganda is not even in the deck for consideration. It's not a good business model. It's not a good business strategy. And, and you don't have to look any farther than the fact that even racists know it's bad to be called a racist, so they don't call themselves that.
Right.
So, take all of that nonsense about this being an intentional dog whistle to whip up the Fourth Reich and of the MAGA movement or whatever. To hell with you guys. You don't know what you're talking about. You're like putting way too much credence in that. And I think a lot of it, and you and I've talked about this, a lot of it comes down to the fact that topics like eugenics or bloodlines or things like that, it's a very easy concept for people to grasp. We're all social animals. We all like to think we have a destiny. It's a pseudoscience way of making us feel like there's a way that we can manage that. It's really no different than super soldier serum, right? It's no different than drawing the sword from the stone and having, having superpowers come out as a result of that. Our stories are filled with the special thing that turns a person from a regular person into a super, right? But we're all Syndrome. We're not Jack Parr, or we're not Frank Parr, right?
Nice, good reference.
So
okay, we have Ryan Laffey says, imagine if a black model said, "My genes are black. They don't age like spoiled milk." Yeah, I don't know if that's quite along the same lines, but yeah.
There is actually an Instagram post of a African American celebrity who did that as a reaction to this campaign, and I don't know how that has worked for her.
I haven't seen that.
But I do think there are some really, really on brand African American models who would kill it if they were in a campaign. We talked about their good genes. Absolutely.
Well, it's funny. I mean, I can't. Isaiah Mustafa, who was in the original Old Spice ads, "Look at me, I'm on a horse." I love Isaiah. He was the nicest guy in the world, and those ads were hilarious. I mean, he's a great looking guy with a great body, and that's why and he had a great voice, and he was perfect in those ads. But I don't think anyone ever accused those ads of having some kind of a dog whistle or some kind of. It was just like, here's a hot dude,
Yeah.
And
yeah, you got to keep in mind the whole term dog whistle really relates to finding a way to secretly signal to a segment of the population who feels like they've been unfairly marginalized because they're white and male.
Yeah, there you go.
And no one should be marginalized based on who they are or what their identity is, but that really is for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, it's
not just white males.
No, I think I felt marginalized when I saw how beautiful Isaiah Mustafa is with his shirt off, and his beautiful face and the dulcet tones of his voice. I mean, he's a great guy. We have from Isaac Cushman, 3229. Greetings from Mukilteo, Washington. I saw a movie in Mukilteo once. Shockingly and regretfully, I have made it 26 years on this rock without seeing a single Star Trek anything. What the hell is wrong with you? What do you think is the best starting point for someone who's on the fence? Well, first of all, I'm a big advocate of first principles, and I would say that the very first episode of Star Trek that you should watch is an episode called The Corbomite Maneuver. And it was actually the first episode produced after the pilot, but the visual effects took so long that it wasn't aired until the middle of the first season. Now, there's elements in The Corbomite Maneuver that are a little cheesy, admittedly, but it immediately establishes, I think, the paradigm of Star Trek. You get to meet all of the crew. It has a lot of great dynamics, a lot of the episodes on the bridge, but it also deals with things aren't what they sometimes seem to be. Don't judge a book by its cover. It's got some great Star Trek isms in it. It has some alien ship action. I would suggest watching the original version from '66 and instead of the remastered version. Maybe the remastered version will work better for you, but I remember when I was a child, there's an effect shot in it where something comes up very quickly to the Enterprise, and it's huge, and it really had an element of cosmic awe and wonder in it for me, and to me, it is a prototypical Star Trek episode. It's got everything in it, and by watching that one episode, you will know whether you want to continue on your Star Trek journey. Mike, do you have an episode? Do you have a thing that you would suggest?
I have a couple things I'd suggest. Balance of Terror, right? Isn't that the one?
That's another
submarine battle in the history of spaceflight.
Yeah, that is a fantastic episode, again, from the first season.
Right.
It's
the thing about that episode, though, seriously, that makes it, I think, so fascinating is how, because it's a bottle show.
Yep.
All of this is happening on board the ship.
Well, the same is true of the Corbomite maneuver, maybe
but,
until the very end, but
you're seeing, well, yeah, when we all have Tranya.
Yeah.
But the thing about Balance of Terror that is, I think, so evocative to me is that you see tensions flare on the bridge that are very relevant today, but they are addressed in a way that is appropriate for the 22nd century or the 23rd century.
Bigotry has no place on the bridge.
Absolutely. And it's great in that regard. However, I would say the best Star Trek movie, and Rob, you and I have talked about how I feel about Star Trek as a movie franchise. So take this for what it's worth. The best Star Trek movie is Galaxy Quest.
We can have that conversation. A lot of people feel that way. The Akutas, they always say that, and there's some truth in that.
It's the most Star Trek of all the Star Trek movies.
Yeah.
All right. And it's got Tony Shalhoub in it.
It's got Tony Shalhoub in it. Yeah.
Up for that.
I don't know if you went and saw Fantastic Four, but JT Hiskey asks, is there a reason the ship in the Fantastic Four movie only has 3 fins, but the ship in the Thunderbolts credit scene has 4 fins? Is it a different ship? It is a different ship, Feige confirmed, but why? Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Hey, I think that's a very legitimate question to ask, but why is a very interesting, that's a very relevant question. I do not have the answer.
Here's the thing I think we've learned, though, about Marvel movies. There will eventually be an answer.
There will be an answer.
Even if they didn't think about it even if they didn't notice it until the first week that the movie was out, they'll find an answer for it. And we will all go like, oh, well, of course. They were the Fantastic Three, or whatever the answer is. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Our own Major Chai Chai says, she's been a member of the channel for 18 months. She says, hi, Mike. Good to see you again. Missed you at San Diego Comic-Con last week.
I was so bummed. That looked like that was so much fun, you guys, and all the other stuff that I saw from my other friends that were there. And, it looks like you guys had a great opportunity to hang out with Ron Moore and Paul Jenkins and just all kinds of great guys. It's like, if I could have been there, I would have been there. And my daughter-in-law is killing me because she really, really, really wants to go to her first Comic-Con. So maybe we'll go next year.
Next year, It's my 37th.
That'd be amazing.
We'll go again.
And Max was there. I missed Max.
Max was there. Man, we had a good time with Max. Sat down with him a couple of times, and then we had a panel. Coach Sipping Jamba Juice asks this. He says, "The Social Network 2 sounds like it won't be good. No David Fincher, no Jesse Eisenberg. What gives?" Eisenberg said he was willing to come back. I don't know. I mean, it might be because I might be too young. I don't know. But look, Aaron Sorkin. Look, his debut feature that he directed, Molly's Game. I really love that movie. And then he made the Chicago 7 movie, and I think he's obviously a great writer, and he's turning into quite a great director. So I think he's got a plan. In a way, I think that this new, whether they've got a great cast that they're lining up for this movie. I think what's interesting about it is even though it's going to be called The Social Network 2, I would suspect they're going to change the title eventually. They're calling it that now because it's going to deal with many different things. The Social Network dealt with friends in college. And what happened when they happened to create Facebook? If you remember the ad campaign for that on the poster, it said, "You don't get to 500,000 friends without making a few enemies," and now 500,000 seems like a long time ago. Now there's billions of people, so the world has completely shifted. It's a whole different ball game. So I don't know. I don't think they want to make it necessarily a direct sequel as it is so much an examination of the world after social media had changed it. So, although I don't...
I have a question for you though, Rob, and that is all these sequels. I mean, we've been dealing with sequels now for a while, but you remember when we were young, a sequel to a movie was the exception. It wasn't the rule.
It was people thought sequels were they weren't considered successful.
Right,
they were really cash grabs, you know, and then things happened like obviously Godfather 2 sort of changed the feeling. Then Jaws 2 wasn't terrible. Rocky 2 did very good business. And then of course The Empire Strikes Back adding to it. So then, but nowadays, I mean, the real problem I think with Hollywood has become much, and Ron Moore was talking about this when we were hanging out with him. Everything is way too expensive. It's become way too expensive. So if you're, you know, it used to be that a movie, Star Wars, cost $11 million, you know, and the sequel cost $20 million. Nowadays, if they were going to make a Star Wars sequel, it's a $250 million proposition. So the economics are completely blown out of the water. So the only way anybody can justify spending that kind of money, I mean, I think if there's a way to make movies, I think they should cap studio movies at $40 million. Learn how to make movies for $40 million. I don't know if you could. I mean, even indie movies are going up to that budget. And with streaming not caring about how much movies cost, I mean, they'll make movies like The Gray Man for $250 million. That isn't going to make one dime. It's going right on your streaming platform. How do those economics work? When your subscription buys you into Netflix, and your subscription, it's got to be parceled out amongst everything that they've made and everything that they've licensed. So,
well, keep in mind, you and I have had this conversation before, but keep in mind that the challenge now that all of the streamers are facing is very similar to what magazines and newspapers have faced for years, and that is, how do you stop or slow down the churn in subscriptions? Because you reach a point where you can't really see significant subscriber growth. So the issue is, you know, you're going to lose some every month. What do you have to keep adding in terms of content and value to either keep people and get them to renew, or to keep them on their monthly plan? And you know, that is, I think, the business conundrum that so many streamers are running into now. Because before, it used to be like, well, we put this stuff on, and well, if we can just attract, you know, 5 million more people to our service, then it all makes perfectly good sense, because over the course of 12 months, that's going to yield, you know, $150 million or whatever it is.
Sure.
$1.5 billion. Well,
we've got, speaking of sequels, is the rumor that Jonathan Batul is writing a sequel to The Last Starfighter true? You know what? The Mattuine says that. I've heard that there's a Last Starfighter sequel ongoing for years. You know, I can't say what I saw. I did see something at Comic-Con that may or may not be Last Starfighter related, that somebody I know very well is working on. Maybe. I'm not saying if that's true or not. I don't know if I really saw it. What I saw, it could have been
everybody needs to understand, this is why it's so much fun to go to Comic-Con with Rob, because you get to meet all of these people in these dark corners of the convention hall, and they've got all this cool shit.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, Ron Moore just came and hung out, you know, and I didn't even ask him about God of War. I was just geeking out about For All Mankind and the new upcoming spinoff Star City. And it's funny, I'm like, you know, I was like, is Ed going to come back? And I went, you know, Justice for Margot. He actually laughed. Or I said, Free Margot. I said, Free Margot, Justice for Sergei. And I'm like, because, you know, I was like, Sergei's got to be in Star City, right? He's like, well, what do you think? You know, because it goes back in time, and it covers the same. It's going to be the same kind of thing. So that was cool.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's going to be awesome.
Yeah. So
interestingly enough, you know, the Cosmodrome for the Soviet space program is in Kazakhstan.
Yeah. Yep.
There you go.
Yeah, so, but they're shooting it in some. I don't know if they're shooting it in Bulgaria or somewhere else, Czech Republic. But our friend Stubble McShave sends in a tip.
Hey,
people Stubble's here. Everyone always asks about it. The tip link is in the description of the show. The super chat link's at the bottom of the chat. Some people just like to use the tip link. It's 6 and 1/2 dozen of the other, really. Stubble McShave says, you should do a segment on the Variety article on the startup Fable, which launches Showrunner, a tool for user-directed TV shows. Oh, great. Oh, no. Yes, I should. I do not know about this, but Stubble is always sending me great ideas. If he's not sending me books, he's sending me great ideas to look into, and I've used many of his ideas as show topics. So, yes. Stubble, that is great. Well, Mike, I should let you go. I promise I've kept you longer than I thought, but I really thought after Sean's letter that I wanted to have you come in and opine on it, because I thought his letter was it was really well written, and obviously it was very heartfelt, so I wanted to give it a little bit of extra oomph.
Absolutely. And again, back to the very first point I made, Sean's doing some important work, and thank you for that. It's important that we, as all of us humans, learn how to take care of each other before our artificial intelligence overlords take over control.
Or decide to get rid of us with their micro drones that'll just fly up our nostrils and kill us in our sleep. There will be no defense, or something even worse. Or maybe it'll just be like it was in Spike Jonze' movie Her, and they'll just go away because they are going to understand the universe more than we will.
Yeah.
And they'll let us fend for ourselves.
So
who knows?
You ants, keep doing what you're doing. We'll see you later. Yeah.
Well, Mike Boden, thank you for coming on Robservations. Always great to see you. And a last plug, if you want to get True Noir, the Assassination of Anton Cermak, you can go to truenoir.co. Mike oversees that, and you should get it. And you heard a snippet from. See, I can't talk a lot of mad shit about other people's work without having to do my own work. And you got to see a White Devils trailer and hear that clip, or a clip from True Noir at the beginning of the show. Those are examples of my work. So at least if you want to come at me, bro, at least I've got something you can critique and make fun of, as well as that. How about that Star Trek episode that aired this week? It was actually an episode of Star Trek that mocked the original series.
Well,
and I would say all of modern Star Trek mocks the original series and all of Star Trek.
All I got to say is that if you walk into a meeting and you go like, I got that great idea for the next Star Trek franchise, and it's called Strange New Worlds, the last thing I would expect to hear as a follow-up to that statement is, so we're going to use all these characters from the previous show and go to all the places that they've been.
Yeah, it baffles me. I mean, it is, as I've said, and this third season it's hitting new lows of creative bankruptcy. They've had 4 episodes, and where's any originality? And the thing is, they got a great cast. They've got all the money in the world to make something look terrific, and we keep getting what we're getting. I keep getting spiders from the ceiling, but it bothers me. Anyway, Mike, I'm going to go do more letters from people.
Thank you very much.
And I'll let you go. So that was the great Mike Boden, everybody. And all right, Mike, and thanks for being here. I will see you later. That was Mike Boden, everyone. And the Robo producer says, favorite Naked Gun movie. Let's stream, dude. The first one. I haven't seen the new one. The first one was my favorite. But really, of the Zaz movies, I'm an Airplane top secret guy myself. So there you go. And the Robo producer has been a member of the channel for 24 months, which is good. Mark Spector's Avatar says, Rob, Superman didn't do $1 billion. We made a deal. Your Eric Draven hot toy figure is mine, which is right there. I would get the one that there's a newer one that this jacket is this pleather jacket. It's beginning to flake. It's going to disintegrate. So I would imagine you'd want to get the newer one that's made with better materials that don't flake. But if I have to buy it for you, I guess a deal's a deal. So this next letter, it's not very long, but it's a good one. It comes to us from J.J. Hetherington. J.J. Hetherington writes, Hi, Rob. Regarding Robservations 1050, I was thrilled by your explanation of the time travel sequence in Superman the movie. I, too, was 11 years old at the time of the film's release, and ever since the night I first saw the movie in a theater until this very day, I thought Superman spun Earth backwards on its axis with his super speed. It has annoyed me the entire time, like getting a sand spur stuck in your shoe. Now, I can rest easy, knowing the sequence was actually a visual representation of Superman and not the planet moving back in time. I'm serious, it makes all the difference. I can accept Superman being able to breach the space-time continuum using his super speed. Sure, it's more of a hallmark of the Silver or Bronze Age of Superman storytelling, but since the film was released in 1978, I'm fine with it. Thank you for helping to make a great movie that much better. For those people who are wondering what Mr. Hetherington was talking about, and this has been, there are things that, as a longtime fan, I mean, literally over half a century being a fan, there are things that have always puzzled me about certain areas of fandom. And one of the things that really puzzles me, even to this day, is the interpretation of Superman the movie when Superman goes back in time. Now, maybe it came from me reading comic books, but for those of you who don't know, like in the Silver Age, if the Flash wanted to go back in time, he would use what was called the cosmic treadmill, and he would run fast enough on the cosmic treadmill that he would literally be able to travel through time because he was going so fast. I never the idea that Superman would spin the world backwards and somehow, like, if you were able to spin the world backwards, why would that go back and why would the world go back in time if it was spinning backwards? The world is not a tape. It wasn't until Christopher Nolan it came out with Tenet that I was like, oh, now maybe people are going to start thinking. But I always thought that in, whatever representation, there's so many different representations of traveling through time. Sometimes it's like in Back to the Future, it can be instantaneous. Sometimes, as in Time After Time or The Time Machine from 1960, when you're traveling through time, you go on this journey. But when I saw Superman the movie for the first time in 1978, I thought it was obvious, because I read comic books and watched Star Trek and The Twilight Zone, that he was flying, maybe he had to go against gravity, but, he's not supposed to interfere with the affairs of humanity. That's what Jor-El tells him. But it's Superman that's flying. It's Superman that's becoming displaced in time. And they used that as an example of showing us how he was traveling through time. The Earth didn't move. Superman was moving, and we were seeing Superman moving through time. I always thought that was obvious. When I was 11 years old, I was like, I never, ever thought, ever, that the Earth was literally being run backwards and time would go backwards. Superman was traveling through time. And it was just represented that way in the movie, which I thought was very cool. And as, we all want to point out, that was supposed to be the end of Superman 2. But anyway, so that's what that letter refers to. And I've always found it interesting that people didn't think that. And that was something I learned as I grew older. I was like, oh, some people think that the world... And it perplexed me. I'm like, do you really think that that's what's happening here? I was like, really? Because I didn't, and I'm right. I am right. So I'm just saying. I know I'm being a little funny, but I'm not, because I am correct. So this one, this is a letter that I want to read. It's a long one. And it comes from Matteo Romano. Matteo Romano. And he writes, I've never sent a fan letter in my whole life before this moment, although I've wanted to on several occasions, especially to your channel. But there's always been some form of self-doubt that stopped me. This time, however, something just clicked inside of me as I came out of the movie theater, doubly so when I listened to Robservations 1046. Maybe it's because I've been writing a lot on my own since last September, but now I felt compelled to share my thoughts with people that I know would respond and enrich the conversation 1,000 times more than if I just let it stir through my synapses, and none would be a better candidate than you by miles. Hey, flattery will get you everywhere there, Matt. I apologize for the black background document, but I'm extremely photosensitive, and white backgrounds have an effect not dissimilar to needles in my eyebrows. So this letter I've read before, but I wanted to read it again because it seems to have become more relevant. But anyway, here it goes. Good day to you, Rob. This is my first time writing a letter to you, albeit listening as regularly as I can, personal tasks and commitments permitting. Let me start by apologizing if I pull out any sort of language-related blunders, as English isn't my native language. However, I will try my best to express myself adequately. I will avoid spoilers as much as I can, but I have to mention some story beats to solidify my points here and there. You will be the best judge whether it will be appropriate or not to read those, even if I don't really believe there's much to spoil about this movie in the first place, except that one big thing. I apologize in advance for going off the rails, but I'm trying myself to navigate the maelstrom of emotions that this movie stirred inside of me. I hope, at the very least, the read presented some interesting and therefore entertaining points to analyze or reanalyze. The absolute certainty that this film left in me is that I liked talking about it more than I actually liked watching it. So I'm eager to follow the next discussions regarding this title in future episodes. And I'm reading this again because Superman has now been out for a couple weeks, and a lot of people have a lot of things to say to me, but I thought this letter by a non-native speaker, English language speaker, will... I've been thinking a lot about this letter, so I'm going to read it again. I won't lie to you. Superman 2025 kind of melted my brain a little bit, which, by the way, came out on my birthday. Despite my restraint shown in giving into the hype, I still looked favorably and hopefully towards it. Besides, James Gunn had a stellar track record over the years, not only regarding superhero movies, but also other smaller titles as well, so he deserves such goodwill on credit alone. And I feel compelled to talk about it to someone that can surely appreciate the intricacies closely tied to whatever orbits this movie, both in terms of narrative and meta-narrative, hence the title of this letter, because in my opinion there is a giant meta-narrative factor looming over this movie. Sounds ominous, I know, but in a sense I kind of think it is. It's funny that you say this Superman is the antithesis of what this character is supposed to be, because to me it goes above and beyond through fiery loops to course correct what the Snyder approach to Superman and the Justice League was, so much so that it focuses obsessively on the most superficial, to a degree, aspects of the character just to hammer home, this is the Superman so many of you have been clamoring to get back to since Man of Steel. I certainly was, at the expense of what to me is lacking gravely in most of the film, which is character moments and exploration. It's even weirder that this is happening in a James Gunn movie because he's one of the best at regaling meaningful, heartwarming, or heartbreaking character moments and interactions. Yet the movie had to cram so much stuff in there that everyone becomes kind of the template or the archetype of itself. Easily the best character moment in the whole movie is when Lois interviews Superman. If you don't want to spoil it, you might say a central character has a heavy talk with Superman for the first time, and she absolutely dismantles him. And I wish I got similar moments between other characters. As a matter of fact, I was craving such moments like a starving man. There are a couple more such moments, don't get me wrong, but once again, there's so much that gets in the way of character development, mostly and-thens. The whole movie is basically a big and-then, which in a way is an incredible undertaking, but on the other hand, it makes it kind of hollow, since you almost never get the chance to savor any moment in itself and let a scene breathe, which I know you addressed in your review, and I totally agree. The crisis that Clark goes through, not making any spoilers here, when he hits his lowest point feels quite unimpactful, since he remains the same, save when he has a mostly small and harmless outburst, which self-defeats even more by the next scene when he immediately does the most Superman thing he can do. Don't read what comes next if you don't want to spoil the audience, but I mean when he surrenders to the authorities. On the same note, we almost never see Clark go through a real arc in the movie. He's the same the whole way through, and we really needed one since we already don't get an origin story of him where he goes through his first transformation as a hero. In turn, this inexorably takes the wind out of the story resolution sails, therefore forcing Gunn to spell out everything that could have been sprinkled in earlier through less cut-and-dried monologues or just by clever showing not telling had he gone through a catharsis in the first place. It very much felt like an in case you don't get it, here's a foolproof explanation for all the dummies. Superman could have, and should have, in my opinion, definitely shouted less and acted calmer, especially because of his outburst during his lowest point. We'd get a nice contrast from where he was at that point and where he is after he deals with his internal struggle. Maybe his first instinct would be to yell, but after hearing his nemesis' speech, he just deflates and talks more softly, definitely with disappointment and almost pity towards Lex, which would be a very Superman thing to do. Wasn't this supposed to be the movie's #1 priority after all? This is the reason why I said it seems to be going on only after surface aspects in the beginning. I do want to give a shout out to Nicholas Hoult, though, because there's been this moment, and it's sad that it's mostly all he was given, when he gets to emote without saying a word. With that smirk of disbelief and renewed sense of self-inflation, that was literally top-notch. Once again, at the cost of sounding like a broken record, I wish we got more of that. Instead of this Greek play-esque tendency to enter the scene, shout their lines in the most didactic way possible, leaving zero space for nuance and subtext. On the same note, why didn't we get an actual interview with Lois at the end? I don't know. Like I said before, I think that was a great idea you had there. I feel that might have been the perfect payoff to all of Clark's arcs, which now should be more self-aware and be able to conduct it in a proper Superman way instead of a pompous, immature, albeit extremely well-intentioned and naive guy. That alone would have improved the movie so much, in my opinion, even if I already said the same thing about his final confrontation with Lex. Going back to the meta stuff, I got this distinct impression of the movie requiring you to do a lot of what I like to call the meta-diegetic legwork, in the sense that the movie is asking the viewer to know and already accept a lot of what the Superman mythos are, instead of winning you over through the story, giving the viewers barely a few memory refreshers here and there since it's too concerned to show so much action to be able to do anything else. For example, can someone really buy Lex Luthor being that level of super genius? If you don't have the necessary media literacy baggage supporting your knowledge of this universe, he basically just looks like a very overdressed Elon Musk-esque tech bro. Undoubtedly intelligent, sure, but to the point of building pocket dimensions, portals, and all sorts of high sci-fi contraptions? Personally, I don't think so, but the movie grabs you by the pants and throws you into this whirlwind with a simple premise. I hope you know what Lex Luthor's capable of, because we're coming in hot. Either way. But if you have to be introduced to the world, since this is supposed to be a reset, this would be too much for someone that's only seen other Superman movies? Could Gene Hackman be able to build what this Lex did? Not given what we see in the movies, could Jesse Eisenberg do that instead? Not really. Kryptonian technology did all the legwork when it came to creating Doomsday, and we certainly never saw flying robots patrol his headquarters. At least if we saw Holt's Lex actually build or fix some piece of technology, it would have been easier to accept the reality of the movie as outsiders that are being introduced to this universe for the first time. This is unfortunately the consequence of Marvel already opening the lid of going for a show and the steady build-up towards bigger, all-encompassing events. But it's not just that. Gunn's choices felt to me to be also victims of the backlash from the perceived mismanagement of the previous DC universe by roughly half the DC fandom, or more generally movie aficionados, which once again ties back to the looming meta-narrative shadow enshrouding this movie. I would be unfair if I also didn't list the positives. First of all, Mr. Terrific stole every scene he was in. That is a fact and proves once again that Gunn can turn every low-tier character into a fan favorite. But I also liked all the individual elements a lot, and you can tell Gunn really did lose himself in the pages of comics earlier in his life, asking himself what would be a cool way to contrast Superman's powers, which led to the most terrifying body horror thing I've ever seen in a superhero movie that literally had me gasping for air, even if I wanted it to be more emotionally heightened to revolt the audience even more. But it's the fact that so many of those individual creative elements are all compressed in one 120-minute movie that is already by itself throws you into a powder keg without prior chances to really connect with our main character and possibly other big figures in the story. And it left me overwhelmed in terms of sheer content and underwhelmed in terms of substance. I would have loved to have seen a movie focused on only one or two at best of these plot elements and delve deeper into them. But instead they were all denied further analysis and attention, whether it's to rush things or whatever other unexplainable reason, or just to make Lex's plan more intricate, that's also a possibility, albeit one I would strongly disagree with, What's for sure is that the movie would definitely have benefited more from a longer runtime, because I felt like I needed time to breathe and better absorb the vibes or moral consequences of key scenes, and of course get more character moments in, as mentioned before. Forget half an hour, I would have gladly watched 1 full hour of scenes that make me better take in this new universe, especially since this is its first iteration. Although fair is fair, I have to concede that technically everything is tied together, which, given the wildly diverse elements that compose this movie, it's basically a miracle that it makes sense at all, let alone being fairly easy to follow if you manage to keep up. And I can't berate Gunn for that. He almost deserves a medal. But on the other hand, was it really necessary to go through this route? I wish it picked a lane and saved some of the plot lines for future movies, because once again, I found them all individually interesting, except maybe a couple of really cartoony things, but I'm also not unfamiliar with DC silliness. I just don't feel like criticizing the choice of embracing it. However, I feel compelled to point out the irony of so many people criticizing Batman v Superman for introducing the Justice League when this one does a very similar thing in the first 30 minutes of the movie. And I'm talking as someone that's always been critical of the Snyderverse, but regardless of personal taste, it had elements that are objectively more structurally sound than Superman 25 and operate overall more like traditional narratives. There's nothing wrong with presenting a character as already established, even though I'm okay with origin stories being retold if they can bring something new to the table, and most importantly are sensibly crafted. What's for sure is that we need something that makes us connect on a deeper level with the main character. As heartwarming as it's been in itself, saving squirrels in the middle of a kaiju invasion can only take you so far, and that's why I respect the Batman so much more now. Not that I had real issues with it, but I was kind of indifferent to it. However, if you want to introduce and build upon someone origin story free, that's how you do it. This movie's structure reminds me a lot of Black Adam, of all movies, actually, which is already not a good sign, except it didn't have 20 minutes of origin story, and you could clearly see Superman, and you can clearly like Superman way more than you could like Black Adam. Except that Black Adam wasn't the first title of a new DC EU movie. Despite the many criticisms of the movie that I feel searingly compelled to list, I really don't think it deserves hate. Only lots of befuddlement. I certainly enjoyed it for what it was, which to me feels more like a cool showcase rather than a traditional narrative. It's just that it could have been so much more. And I really can't get over how much it either suffers or relies on consequences or elements that have nothing to do with the movie's story itself. I wish I could watch this movie anew, with zero knowledge of what's been going on behind the scenes at the administrative levels at DC, just to form an opinion based only on the movie's content, which, despite my best efforts to separate those, I think it's impossible to do at an absolute level. Luckily for me, though, I went to watch this movie with a friend of mine that was available to spend time together on my birthday, and contrary to me or you, he knows absolutely nothing about superheroes. I thought I would have been more confused to jump in without having seen the previous movies, and I cannot for the life of me describe the expression of absolute bewilderment on his face when I had to explain to him that this was the first one of a new universe. So should this letter be read, I sincerely thank you for dedicating your time, attention, and insight into it. I shall treasure it. That comes from Matt. Now, I've read that before, but I wanted to read that again because I thought it brought up a lot of really good points about Superman that I keep hearing again and again and again. And having seen the movie 3 times now, I personally don't think he's really wrong. And I really would love to have had that movie be a half an hour longer so you could spend some time. I think now that I've seen Fantastic Four, both Fantastic Four and Superman, I think were much longer movies. And I think we know that, well, I've heard that Fantastic Four, from a reliable source, that it was the most tested, meaning test screen, to audiences. And I think they really cut Fantastic Four down to the bone. And they wanted it to be a quick 2 hours, but they wanted it to be not a 2.5 hour or pushing 3 hour movie. And I understand that. They wanted to be really exciting and whip you along the story. And I think Superman is the same thing. I know they tested Superman a lot. They were rejiggering it a lot in editing. And I think they came down and he made this explosion. It's almost like, Superman's trying to put everything in the candy store in 1 2 hour period of time. And I would like to have had more time, as our letter writer said, to live with those characters. Same with Fantastic Four. I would have loved to have had the world even more fleshed out. But really interesting. So, yeah, that's why I wanted to read that letter again. And I want to thank you for writing in. This is an interesting letter. This comes from Donnie. Ooh, this is a tough one. Gronenboom? Donnie Gronenboom. I wonder if that's a real last name. Gronenboom is a great, once you can say it, that's a great name. So Donnie Gronenboom writes in and says, "Hi, Rob. I often think about the cinematic experience. Watching a movie on the big screen is unlike any other setting. A movie theater forces you to pay attention and to forge a bond with what is unfolding in front of you. Whether you like a movie or not, you're in for the ride. In the age of user-generated content consisting of 20-second clips, this remains unique. A coworker recently asked me for a movie recommendation. After I suggested one, he said, 'Oh, great, that's on Netflix. That means I can download it to my phone.' Needless to say, I was aghast. What I find interesting is that as big as 4K televisions have become and easily affordable, and most movie theaters have committed to upping their game by offering bigger screens with deeper blacks and better projection technology, instead we've become accustomed to watching movies on smaller screens. Apparently, image quality and size are secondary to having a movie readily available to watch whenever and wherever. Was this coworker even looking for a meaningful experience, or was he just looking for a piece of content to fill time on the toilet? I assume the latter. This could fill me with dread. I could fill this letter with words bemoaning the degradation of the cinematic experience and the decreased role of film in the public consciousness. Or I can take a step back and realize that not much has changed. Back in the 1930s, when American movie theater attendance was a lot higher than it is now, what were people doing? Life was much simpler back then, and entertainment options were limited. People went to the movies to pass the time and distract themselves from their daily lives. I even read that it was normal to come into the movie theater during the third act and then stay for the next showing to see the new newsreels and understand what the hell led up to the ending. This would be unheard of today and seen as blasphemous by movie lovers. Is this a reasonable line of thinking enough to defeat my own nostalgia? Of course not. Emotion trumps reason every time. You can bet your ass that when my daughter is old enough, I will bore her by making her sit down to watch a 3-hour cinematic masterpiece. Remember, if you fall asleep, I will start it all over again. Thanks for all the good times, Rob. Regards, Donnie, an imagination connoisseur from the Netherlands. This is a passionate, I feel very passionate about this subject. Obviously, movies have been very meaningful to me. And, I used to joke that movies were my religion or Star Trek was my religion. But I think the function of religion in our society is we want to make sense of our existence. And I think whether or not you believe in God or a God, the God, your God, religion offers a structure and a way of it kind of provides answers to those big questions. To use Star Trek as an example, is this all I am? Is there nothing more? Why am I here? What am I supposed to do while I'm here? But for me, one of the interesting things about movies and storytelling in general, like scripture, like the Judeo-Christian Bible, the Old and the New Testament, it uses storytellings and parables to impart knowledge to believers, or anybody really who reads those religious texts. And I'm a big fan of religious texts, whether it's the Bible, whether it's the Quran, whether it's other people's beliefs, and other religious texts from different religions around the world throughout history. It's always interesting because they're always dealing with these big issues. And I find that fascinating. But for me, movies were always an exploration into existence. As all good storytelling is, movies were trying to give us fictional scenarios that, or, you know, if you're watching documentaries telling you the truth, hopefully, about certain things or certain goings on around the world. But movies themselves, the reason I love them is because they were explorations into the world that we live in. Not so much, it was more like, for instance, I'll give you an example. When I was a kid, there was a movie that came out that starred Michael Douglas, Jane Fonda, and Jack Lemmon, and it was called The China Syndrome. And it was playing into our fear of both the Cold War, the idea of nuclear annihilation. But in the case of the China Syndrome was if a nuclear core melted down, it would melt down through the floor of a nuclear reactor and expose everybody, expose the world to radioactivity. Lots of people would die, be a horrible disaster. And through corporate greed and malfeasance, and there was an accident it was very much like 3 Mile Island. A big accident happened at a nuclear power plant, and the press happened to be there, and there was a cover-up, and it was really a movie about our world. It was using the horrific idea of a nuclear meltdown to make it interesting, but it dealt with issues like freedom of the press, and it dealt with corporate greed, and it dealt with the human elements overseeing these incredible powers. And there was so much in it, and obviously it was a hot button issue at the time. But I remember going to see the movie, and there was a little bit of a horror aspect to it. If this were to actually happen, there was a conspiracy theory element to it all. And I remember seeing it, and it just was very thought provoking, and I loved it. I owned it on Blu-ray. But, you know, these movies, you would go see these movies, and they were windows. Nowadays, nobody would make the China Syndrome. As a matter of fact, I've been thinking, I keep bumping on this period of time that was incredibly influential to me, between, like, 1978 and 1983. And there were all of these movies like The China Syndrome, like All That Jazz, like Altered States, like The Big Chill, you know, and Justice for All, The Verdict, Tootsie. They were all movies about our world, the world that I was going to inhabit as I got a little older. But they were all movies that were contemporary films, even things like Annie Hall in Manhattan, Stardust Memories, you know, Woody Allen's New York movies. It made me want to go live in New York. And then there were movies before that, but it was the time, it was the age that I was at. You know, 78 to 83, I went from being 11 years old to being 16, basically. And it was 10 years old, 16 years old. And it was a very formative part of my life. You know, I ended elementary school, went into 3-year junior high, and then 3-year high school. I was a sophomore in high school in 83. And all of these movies were all about, I loved movies about I love science fiction, fantasy, and horror, but I loved movies about our world. And the thing was, when you went into a movie theater, and this I think has been, like, there were no phones. For me, the whole act of going into a movie theater it was like being in your own sensory deprivation tank. You went to a movie theater knowing the light was going to come down. You didn't want to hear anybody else talking. And it was, you were entering into the world of this story, and nothing else mattered. I didn't think about my day. I didn't think about what was going to happen after I left the movie theater. My mind was completely shut off from anything else other than the story that I was going to see unfold on the big screen. And I'm convinced, I don't know if anyone's ever done a study of this, but for me personally, I'm able to just, when I watch a movie, nothing else matters. And especially in a movie theater, and I feel that psychologically, the very act of going to a movie theater and with all like-minded people, you opened up your mind in ways you didn't anywhere else or at any other time. At least for me, that's the way I did it. And I would completely have my mind open. And I'm sure my subconscious was probably way open, you know, the third eye, whatever all those things are, whatever you could do psychologically. So, I mean, in a way, I was probably addicted to this experience, but my intellect and my mind was completely engaged. And I watched these movies about the world, the adult world that I was going to enter into, and those are kind of my favorite movies. Yeah, I love science fiction, fantasy, and horror, but my favorite movies are movies like The Fucking Verdict. Or I love movies about lawyers. And Justice for All and The Verdict, love those two films. But even Altered States, which was a science fiction movie, but it was about college professors, geeky college professors that still, I mean, Dr. Jessup, William Hurt was a hunk of burning love being in Altered States and then Body Heat. I mean, but that guy admired him like Joe Gideon. He wasn't beyond sleeping with his students, but he didn't coerce them. And then he had a older colleague girlfriend, but back then, he wasn't like much older than his students either. But I was like, I like that guy, and then he's going to go discover the truths of existence. He's going to go back down our evolutionary road and become part of the first truth, and taking peyote in Mexico and playing with his nervous system, his mind. I mean, I was watching this stuff going, I want to be adults like Dr. Jessup and all that in Altered States, or I wanted to be Joe Gideon and all that jazz. Bob Fosse came out the year before. But yeah, so being in a movie theater nowadays, you can't do that. Because invariably, people do, the people that go into movies nowadays, and by the way, most people felt that way too. I did not grow up in a world where people talked in movie theaters because we didn't have the things. You didn't have a phone that is a constant source of distraction, that dopamine hit. Again, watching movies is a skill. And I do think that a lot of I don't mean to sound like an old man shouting at the clouds, but there are a lot of people that don't know how to go to a movie theater and watch a movie. They cannot give themselves over to it. They're too distracted, and I think that's whatever's going on with their phone or whatever they have to deal with their friends or whatever. Movies don't matter to our society the way they used to. People are much more interested in themselves. Everybody is suffering from main character syndrome, which is fine. It's just that for me, when I like to go into a movie theater, I like to be completely have my mind open, and there's always somebody distracting. I don't think people understand, because everyone's selfish now. Nobody's looking out for other people, and I'm not being critical. It's just the way it is, because when you've become a central character in your own movie or your own life or your own whatever, but it. See, it used to be we're all the main characters in our own lives because we're our main character. It's just we weren't aware of it. Nowadays, I mean, you're literally curating your life for people. I do it, on Instagram or I'll make videos of look where I am, and here's a picture of this, and here's the cake I'm eating, here's the drink I'm about to have. I'm sitting here in a movie theater. Like, nobody used to do that, and nobody cared. And now we do. So the very act of going to movies has changed, and I believe it's diminished us because it's not just movies, it's everything. You look at kids today. It's me, man. Kids run around. If I ran around and mouthed off as a child, as a 5 or 6 year old man, I would catch hell. What I see today it's pretty unbelievable because there's no discipline, and going to a movie theater requires discipline. It requires you to sit down. If you can't sit down, put your phone away, and turn off everything outside of what's going on, you really shouldn't go to the movie theater because it's a public event. And what you're doing is you're diminishing your lack of enthusiasm or your lack of ability to sit down and watch a movie is detrimental to the rest of the people there. And I wish more and more people understood this, because it also speaks to the fact if you can't go and give yourself over to a movie for 2 hours, how are you going to learn anything? How are you going to learn? How are you going to be good at your job? Or whatever job that might be. How are you going to be passionate about anything? I mean, that lack of attention span affects every part of your life. It affects your romantic life. It affects your social life. It affects your inner life. It's crazy. Now people have to be constantly, which means you're subject to outside influences. Unless you can be alone in your own head and figure out who the hell you are. And moviegoing is a big thing. So I want to thank you, Donnie, for writing in and making me opine this way on your question. I think it's a good question, and I think it speaks to shortcomings. I mean, moviegoing as a display of the shortcomings of civilization. Let's see where we're at here. Roberto Suarez has confirmed there will be a member chat set for tomorrow. One of the great joys of my life is not having just met Roberto Suarez, but for some reason he started to make AI-assisted images of me, and it has something topical to do with a movie that came out. I wonder if Roberto has touched on the Naked Gun franchise. I'm just wondering. I haven't seen it yet. So if you're a new member of the channel, we start at 11 Pacific, and we just hang out, man. We just hang out. So, yeah. So there you go. So it's confirmed. It is confirmed. Let's see. Robo Producer Major Chai Chai says, I still owe you an address, a movie, and lunch. Yes, I do. I still owe you. We'll get that. If I don't get it to you in the next couple days, we'll get it from Dieter on Sunday. Mr. Mastodon Farm says, hey, Rob, it's been a while. Have you seen Together yet? It's so good. I can't wait to go see it again. I was going to go see it the other day, and I didn't, but I am going to go see it. DLGP3ZX says, finally getting my office together. I need help setting it up like yours for my 3D models that I print and review movies. I'm glad to be back. I miss Midnight Metal. Well, we did one a couple weeks ago. I'd love to see your 3D models, man. People are print. I saw today somebody, a company out of Britain, like Cosmic Models. Cosmic is spelled with a Z. Out of the UK, made an awesome 1/20th scale travel pod from Star Trek the Motion Picture that takes Kirk and company to the Enterprise in Star Trek the Motion Picture. DBZZ Now says, what I love about Superman 2025 is that it showed that masculinity does not mean to be closed off, but instead having sincerity. If I ever have a son, I would want one like this movie's Clark. Yeah, I thought that was very, very cool too. Another View 9 has become a member of the channel. And so is DLGP3ZX. Oh, you are already a member for 49 months. Well, thank you for the support. I appreciate that. Austrian Stories say, are people mad at the European phenotype? Hey, you know what? I mean, the European phenotype, we're all like colonizers. It's so weird. Human history has been all about one group colonizing another group. That's been history. To talk about, are you colonizers? Who hasn't been a colonizer in some way, shape, or form? We'll go back far enough, and it's so weird. It's so bizarre. When I was in college, people didn't talk that way. We just didn't. We were concentrating on doing things and expanding our minds, not bitching and moaning and complaining about the past. It's like, let's go into the future, where we'll spend the rest of our lives, but everyone wants to right wrongs from hundreds of years ago. Why? Why are you looking backwards? We're going to blame some of the people in this room. It doesn't make any sense. If you're caught up with what happened hundreds of years ago and you're going to try and right a 100-year-old or 200-year-old or 400-year-old wrong, here's a news flash. You can't. It already happened. You're never going to fix it. What you need to do is move forward and try and prevent those things from ever happening again. It's such an odd place to be. Angel Galvin 4692 says, thanks, Rob, for your insightful thoughts and wisdom. Well, I thank you for the nice comment. Darren Emin 3093 says, Strange New Worlds, Season 3, Episode 4 made me viscerally angry. I felt as if they insulted TOS, Shatner, and Gene Roddenberry. Also, why is this show the Spock love rectangle? Thanks, Rob. Because the people writing it are shitty fucking writers. They don't know how, they literally don't know how to write Star Trek. So what they're doing is writing everything but Star Trek. A Star Trek parody episode in the holodeck, no less. We have to, 4 episodes of this show, the first 4 are all gimmicks. There's not one thing about them that haven't referred back to the classic series or Next Generation. You would think you would want a show that stands on its own. A lot of people like Strange New Worlds because fans especially have a high tolerance for comedy and that kind of thing. And I get it. But Strange New Worlds started with great promise, great cast, and the fact that they're jumping in from Spock's going to have another. What is the obsession? The funny thing is, there's a lot of female writers on this show, and you know when Spock first was introduced as a character, he became a sex symbol amongst the women that watched the show in the 60s. He clearly still is. But what is this weird obsession to make Spock not at all Spock? It's bizarre. It's just another. I mean, I'm sorry. The people writing the show do not know how to write this show. And a parody episode, you know, you have to understand that when classic Star Trek, people always complain, well, what about the funny episodes on Star Trek? As goofy as some of those episodes were, the plots and the stories and the points that were being made were not at all goofy. They were really interesting points that were being made, even if Star Trek had people that were black on one side and white on the other. I mean, if you look at how that episode ends, it's heartbreaking. And sure, it was an overtly didactic treatise on race relations in America, but it ended in a way that it's hardcore. It's harsh. This show it has nothing to say to anybody. It's just recycled drivel. It is a Star Trek show written by people that haven't watched Star Trek and don't understand Star Trek. All they see is the goofiness of it all, and I cannot stand it. It has done more damage how can you damage a TV franchise? I think it's done more damage to the Star Trek brand. I think everything that's happened with Star Trek since 2009 has damaged the Star Trek brand to a huge extent. Son of John? Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Who wants to bet that Spock will be written to bang number 1 next? Probably. They probably are just fuck buddies and we don't know it yet. I am Jax 1290 says, saw an extended trailer for Keepers at Together this week. It looks fucking rad. Thoughts? You know what? I don't know anything about Keepers. What is Keepers? Sounds really good to me, though. Cannot wait for Weapons next week. First of all, I'm dying to see Weapons. Dying. Here, let's see. What is Keepers? Let me see if I remember what it is, and I'm just losing out on Keepers. The Keepers. Official trailer. Who Killed Sister Kathy? The Keepers is now streaming on Netflix. That must be different. That's The Keepers. Then there's Keeper teaser trailer. Oh, it's the new Oz Perkins movie. Oh, I didn't even know. You know what? I got to look at that later. You know, Oz Perkins is having a good year. I didn't like Longlegs. To be honest, I thought Longlegs was incredibly disappointed. But I like the monkey. And now he's got Keepers. He's cranking those things out. Cranking them out. Best Brad Pitt. What is the best Brad Pitt flick? F1 is solid. Also, The Devil's Own. I like The Devil's Own. There's a lot of Brad Pitt movies I really like. I mean, you know, you think about early Brad Pitt, like California. I liked Interview with a Vampire. The Devil's Own's really good. Killing Him Softly. There's a lot of Brad Pitt movies that I really, really like. The Ocean's 13's a great Ocean's 11's a great Brad Pitt movie. I don't know if I have a favorite of course, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I even love Meet Joe Black. You know, a lot of people don't dig that movie, but I really liked it. You know, it's Martin Brest. I thought it was good. B Things says, they don't get that a lot of TOS's look is the result of artistic choices and styles, not incompetence. The same cannot be said of Strange New Worlds writing. Yeah, you know what? Here's what if you watch this week's episode, which is a holodeck parody mystery story, it's the same problem I was talking about that I have with the show in the movie Galaxy Quest, which is a great movie. The actual show in universe, the Galaxy Quest show as depicted in the movie, is this goofy show. The people that are making Star Trek now look back at the original series, and I'll tell you something. They do not have the ability to watch it without seeing something that's high camp. That's all they know. The Mugatu, the Gorn, Kirk just going, you know, they don't know how to watch the show. They have no idea. It's all camp to them. And so, they literally are making fun of Star Trek and Shatner and the look of it. They don't understand the show was beautifully photographed. Jerry Feinerman, those guys knew what they were doing. And it's a real shame what's happened, because Strange New Worlds could have been terrific. It could have been a terrific show. And it doesn't have its own identity, and all they do is ape the original series. They can't write any good original stories. And it's a truly, truly awful show that is masquerading as a good show. People think it's a good show, but it's really not a good show. 1001 Johnny, firing a few tips. Let's see what 1001 Johnny says. So every Superman film has that one... Oh, wait. So every Superman film has that one thing no one can get their heads around or misinterpreted. The world isn't spinning backwards. An amnesia kiss, the whole movie 3 and 4, snapping Zod's neck, and Martha, and the L's for 2025. Yeah, I mean, there's always something people don't, either they don't like it, they don't want it, something's wrong. But I always wonder, where is this definitive portrayal of Superman that everybody's comparing something to? Where is it? Because depending on what you've read, there's so many different interpretations of Superman and his mythos. I've always wondered, what is the right thing? 1001 Johnny goes on to say, let's make a bet, Rob. Every Trek rant we get, you have to watch one episode of Ultraman. That whole rant just for one Ultraman. I think we'll all benefit. There's so much, I mean, it's tough. It's tough to go back and do that, but maybe we can work something out. Colt says, Rob, if you could spend a couple of hours inside Sydney Sweeney's jeans, what would you do with her afterwards? Also, do you believe a Superman can cry? I absolutely believe a Superman can cry. Superman has seen people that he hasn't been able to save. There's been disasters he's probably helped. Every time I'm sure he weeps for every human being he can't help. If you could spend a couple of hours inside Sydney Sweeney's jeans, I'm meaning you write Genes. I don't know what that's like. I like, if I had time with Sydney Sweeney, I would, the term cunning linguist comes to mind. Then she wouldn't be in her jeans at all, and I would have to show the work I can do, and live up to my name. Or because people know what you're doing. You kiss a woman, she knows. So you can tell in that moment. Ask any woman. She knows the first time she kisses somebody if they have anything to really offer her. It's true. Darth Plato says that university has been talking about colonization or imperialism in some form or another for a long time. The root of literature about this comes from Lenin's 1916 book. From 1870 to 1959, 350 texts appear. But from 59 to 1970, it was over 7,500. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I feel like in all this talk about colonization, that there's all these people that have they really want to in their hearts, they want to do something good. They wanted, we have to understand that there was colonization. But what I always find interesting is, I always ask, if somebody wasn't colonized, where would they be now? Where is an example? Show me an example of a place on Earth that wasn't colonized, that has an amazing, thriving, technologically advanced civilization with rights for all, LGBTQ rights, women's rights, great education. Where do they think, and all these people that are criticizing the West and people that have colonized, things that India did get from the British have definitely helped them. If they were left to their own devices and the British had never colonized India or that part of the world, where would they be now? And this idea, I get colonization, but human beings are traveling across the planet. We share our stuff. What is this? I mean, it's like evolution. When you have two human beings come together, the best of their genes not eugenics, but it happens when you make a baby, the baby hopefully will take the better genes from each parent and create something new that's more stronger and resilient than their parents are. That's nature. Eugenics is when you're planning that, when you are charting that course, which, by the way, as medical technology increases, personal eugenics is going to be inevitable. And I say, hasn't anyone seen Gattaca? Gattaca is a movie about genetics, is a movie about eugenics as well. It's just when eugenics, when the state applies it en masse, that's when things get dicey and bad. But hopefully that won't happen. What's up? It's Dom. Says, where do I send the emails for the models? Which models? I don't know which models you're referring to. Darren Emin 3093 says, how bad will Kurtzman's TOS reboot be? Well, we know because we already saw it. 2009, Star Trek, it'll be just like that. Joshua Gonzalez says, I just got The Mirror by Tarkovsky from Criterion. Can't wait. Again, when you watch it, if you've never seen a Tarkovsky film, it's unlike anything you're used to. You have to sit down and put yourself in the mindset that you're going to watch something that is paced extraordinarily different from most things that you've seen. Just keep that in mind when you watch it. Keep that in mind. Brandon says, I would love to know where the Superman test suits are from the Nicolas Cage fittings and if they still exist. They probably do. There is an actual place in Burbank where you can go. It used to be called the Batcave, where that's all they were doing was fabricating super suits. I went down there on Superman Returns. You can see some footage there that I shot. And I think they had those suits. I don't know if they still had them. 20 years ago they did. So they might. Major Chai Chai says, August is turning into a movie marathon month for me. I've got tickets for The Naked Gun, Grave of the Fireflies, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Shin Godzilla, and Jaws. I still need to fit in Nobody 2 and Honey Don't as well. That's a great month. A lot of good stuff coming out. Carlos Lima says, hey Rob, I recently bought Friends Season 3 on DVD. Why didn't you get the whole box set of the entire series on 4K? When watching an episode, I realized that a scene was deleted. It got me thinking that any scenes of movies or TV shows can be deleted or altered. I'm just curious, what's your opinion about this? I am not a fan of deleting any scenes. I think that things should, unless you're doing a whole other director's cut, usually they add stuff, but I don't think we should be doing that. I think we're resilient people, and humanity has been incredibly offensive to other members of the human race since the dawn of time. And part of the way we learn is to see things that are objectionable or questionable and go, we really shouldn't do that again. But to erase things and pretend they didn't happen, well, that's stupid. What are you trying? You're lying to yourself and you're lying to the culture, trying to pretend that that didn't happen. We need to be stronger and more resilient than that. If you are offended by a TV show that came out years ago, the problem is not with the TV show. The problem is with you. You should know enough and be able to contextualize history enough that you can see how we've changed and grown. It's never good to edit things like that. 1001 Johnny says, the right Superman is the one in my head. Well, there you go. Carlos Lima says, celebrates 18 months of membership. Well, that's very cool. B Things, very clever. B Things says, Star Trek, the original series, had a couple of good genes. Gene Kuhn and Gene Roddenberry. You are right. Darth Plato says, Japan was not colonized, but there's Western influence. Yeah, I know. And that's why Japan's such a cool culture. I love Japan. I think Japan is a great place. Although I've never been there. So I wish I had been there. Now, this is very interesting. And Carlos Lima, I should point out this friend's question. He sent in a $50 super chat about this. And I don't understand. We recently saw that Crocodile Dundee was edited. Yeah. And the new home video version that was released, they cut something out because it was culturally insensitive. I mean, when did we become so fragile? I mean, it's like you go back and you watch movies of the... I mean, we had... The Jim Crow South existed not so long ago. And it's almost like we pretend that these things don't exist. Thing is, now everybody wants to go back and celebrate their victimhood when really we live in the best time. We really do live in the best time. I was watching Neil deGrasse Tyson the other day, and he said something really interesting that I never thought about. He said, for the most part, for most of human history, the average life expectancy was 30 years old. And then like in the 1900s, or I mean like in the 1800s or something, the life expectancy went up to like 35. But it wasn't until the last 150 years. And by the way, everybody was eating organic back then. But it wasn't until the last 150 years that our life expectancy essentially doubled. With all of our terrible food and all of the terrible things that go on, our life expectancy doubled. And I was like, wow. And Neil deGrasse Tyson was saying, yep, and everybody was eating organic, and there wasn't factory farming, and there wasn't such crap in our environment or in our food supply. But somehow, yeah, we survived. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Yeah. So Darth Plato said Japan was not colonized. Joshua Gonzalez says, I've seen Solaris, Ivan's Childhood, and Andrei Rublev. Oh, then you know. I don't have to tell you. So you know. And those are great movies. Solaris, Ivan's Childhood, and Andrei Rublev are all good. I love those films. So you have a treat in store. Let's see what the next letter is. Is the next letter going to be a treat? I think it probably will. Matthew Ross writes in. This comes from Matthew Ross. And I should probably read this letter again. I read a letter yesterday, or 2 days ago, where for whatever reason, it was the show was clicking off, and it wasn't in the middle of me reading this letter. I'll probably have to read it again, but this is a response to that letter. Matthew Ross writes, Rob, first, thanks for all that you comment on. Working off the letter you received and read last episode with a food allegory, I don't want to go to that Star Trek restaurant anymore. It's not only not serving classics, but it's tasteless, and I question where the food came from and the kitchen staff's skill. I also wonder, what am I missing? What makes others think this tastes good? It's tasteless slop served in a marked package with the restaurant's name, but none of the flavor or spice. I feel like we're all in the movie Brazil's Restaurant with a picture of what the food is supposed to be. And what am I not seeing that others do? I have asked those who claim to be fans, and they say that they like the emotional threads, but when pressed, they never explain their stance. When I point out the differences with TOS or TNG or anything pre-2009, either they admit it's different, Spock and Chapel, for instance, or they admit to never having watched anything or read anything. It's truly frustrating and in some ways embarrassing to say I'm a Star Trek fan. The Star Trek I know is long gone. This is, I don't know. This last episode combo with Carmen Sandiego, Agatha Christie, and making fun of the show? What a painful watch. What are your thoughts? This comes from Matthew Ross, is an attorney at law in New York City. I feel the same way that you do. You know what? You know what Strange New Worlds has not done? Strange New Worlds has not made me believe. This is what I find strange. There's no verisimilitude in the show. There's no aspect of Star Trek Strange New Worlds that I believe. I don't believe their universe. I don't believe the characters. I don't believe the way any of the people act. They're good actors, but the scripts they're given, it's as if the people do not know. Like, compare Star Trek Strange New Worlds or Star Trek Discovery to any other science fiction, modern science fiction show of the last 20 years. Whether it was Battlestar Galactica, whether it was the 12 Monkeys, Terry Metalis' 12 Monkeys show, the 4 seasons of that, The Expanse, like any science fiction show, the people writing modern Star Trek do not know how. They don't know how through writing and character, even through production design, nothing is credible. None of that, you don't believe anything. And everything is at odds with one another. They don't even make you believe like the Spock is this one note. It's a Spock archetype. It's somebody who hasn't really watched a lot of Star Trek. It's all very superficial. Spock doesn't feel like a real person on Strange New Worlds. He's a Spock archetype. He is, like everything else on the show, it's the sense memory of what these people think Star Trek is without really understanding what Star Trek is. It's Star Trek, but it's illiterate. It's almost as if, it's a facsimile. It's not a real iteration of Star Trek. There's no effort. There's nothing about... I know Jonathan Frakes is a great director, and I don't begrudge him for working. But he's not writing the show, and he just directs what he's given. But even the fantasy... Like, I'll give you an example. Look at do an experiment. If you have access to Paramount Plus, go back and watch a show like Far Beyond the Stars, or one of the great episodes of Deep Space Nine. It's a standalone episode. You'll understand it, and then go watch. I mean, it's not exactly a holodeck episode, and then go watch what we saw last night. Even if the first season of Next Generation gets a bad rap, but go back and watch The Big Goodbye from Star Trek The Next Generation's first season, and then watch what we saw the other night. There is in the case of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, there's a vast difference between those episodes. So, I mean, and check those things out. Star Trek Strange New Worlds does not know how to credibly build a science fiction universe. It just doesn't know how to do it. I mean, you go and watch the German series, the Netflix series Dark. Hell, go watch Eric McCormack's series Travelers and concentrate on the world building and watch how credibility is established. There is none. And they're skating off of, we're all supposed to know. Even though you're watching a Star Trek show, Deep Space Nine, if you think about it, you go from Next Generation, but going from Next Generation to Deep Space Nine is a really interesting study in, you have a whole, Deep Space Nine had a whole different, you introduce a brand new, actually, you met the Cardassians in TNG. We met them in the 4th season in The Wounded. But we had, and the Bajorans we'd met before as well through Ensign Ro. But we'd never seen like a Cardassian space station that was, Terok Nor. We hadn't seen anything. We'd been to a Bajor refugee camp, but we hadn't seen anything really about their religion. We hadn't delved into any of that stuff. And Deep Space Nine had to do all that heavy lifting and introduce you to all these different scenarios and all these different people, and look at what they had to do. And then how much they developed. When you get to seasons 4 through 7 of Deep Space Nine, I mean, the world building and the intelligence behind that show are miles away from, light years away from what they're trying to do or what they're failing to do on Strange New Worlds. Frankly, it's kind of it's embarrassing. This one, to follow up on that, Brian T. Sullivan says, "Hi, Rob. I feel like so much of the discourse around Star Trek these days is centered around the new stuff and how it relates to the old stuff, whether people love it or hate it. I'm tired of it. Now, after being so roundly crushed by the insult disguised as pastiche that Strange New Worlds lobbed at us this week with a space adventure hour, I've decided that this new Star Trek can go climb a tree. Instead, I want to talk about the Star Trek that I fell in love with back in 2007 when I was 12 years old. Oh, I already love this a letter. The original series. Specifically, I have a question for you. What color is Captain Kirk's shirt? or Chekhovs, or Sulus, or Rileys, or Uhuras in those couple of early episodes. I have heard and read that the fabric in person is sort of a greenish hue, and I know that alternate command uniforms, Kirk Rappy shirts, and the dress uniforms are decidedly green. But I'll be damned if those standard command uniforms don't look yellow in basically every frame of the original TV show. While I am interested in your answer to that specific question, I'm actually curious about a broader application of this question. Namely, oh, this letter just got even better. Namely, what is real when it comes to a movie or a TV show, or any sort of mass media? I have heard some argue that we should say command uniforms in TOS are green because that's what the uniforms look like in real life. But by that logic, shouldn't we say that Davy Jones from the Pirates of the Caribbean looks like Bill Nye in a form-fitting leotard with funky dots on his face? After all, that's what he looked like on set before the full elusive magic of cinema was completed. So where's the line? Of course, that question isn't even accounting for how variances exist between individual prints, formats, and releases of a given motion picture. With a painting, there's only one. The only way to actually see Van Gogh's Starry Night is to go to MoMA and see it. When you go and see it, you'll be looking at the same object as anyone else who looks at it. Let's just ignore all of our optical, retinal, and neurological differences in perception for a second. For a movie, you could see a version that is completely different from me, even without it being an alternate cut of the film. I first saw Charade, one of my favorite movies, on a DVD that was made off what could best be described as an utterly wretched print. So it goes when a movie is accidentally public domain. Later, I saw the film again, digitally remastered in a theatrical re-release by Universal, and it was almost like watching a different movie entirely. Both were copies from the same ultimate source, but one felt like watching a movie and the other felt like watching a potato, and not one voiced by Don Rickles. I did not truly see Charade until I saw the digital remaster. Or did I see it and then just see a better version of it later? What is real in a movie? The original Godzilla from 1954 is one of my all-time favorite movies, but have I truly seen it when I'm not yet fluent in Japanese? What color is Captain Kirk's shirt? I'm curious what you and the other imagination connoisseurs think. This is my first letter to the show, so please forgive me if I wrote too many words you didn't. Thanks for being such a thoughtful, curious human being. Be seeing you. Brian. By the way, I'm B Things on YouTube. I've sent in a few super chats in the past. You don't have to read this part, but I figured I'd offer some context. No, of course I had to read that part. First of all, this is a great letter, Brian. What is real in a movie? This is an adjacent question to verisimilitude. Why am I obsessed with verisimilitude? Because it's the quality of being real. And when I watch a movie or a TV show, I'm obsessed with believing in it. Now, I know everything you see in a movie or a TV show, it's all fake. Everything is a controlled environment. It's not really happening. But what you want to do is you want to make the audience believe that what they're seeing is, like, people ask, why worry about where a microphone is? You know, if a microphone dips into the frame, you know, we have to reshoot. You can't get that microphone in the frame. But why? Well, because if a microphone comes into the frame, it immediately shatters the illusion and it makes you realize that there's a camera there shooting this. But we know there's a camera there. You're watching me with a camera that's shooting me right now. So when you're watching a movie, it's understood that there was a bunch of people. There were lights, there were cameras, there was animal wranglers, there was electricians, there was all kinds of things to create what you see in the frame is all constructed. It's all made out of whatever. Sometimes it's made out of baling wire and duct tape, you know, but what you see in the front of everything that's within the frame, and it's not just enough to be real, you have to believe in it. Because you can go to an actual location and you can shoot it badly and it looks not good. Like, you can go to a great majestic place, maybe the Grand Canyon, maybe someplace in the Swiss Alps, and if it's shot badly, you might never know it's actually the Swiss Alps. You want to feel that it's the Swiss Alps. When you go, the whole point of going to shoot on location is to make something feel more real. So what you want is everything in the frame, and everything you put in the frame, even the camera angles. If you have a bad camera angle, like I was just saying, it ruins the shot. Like, if you don't have enough coverage, if you can't edit between shots, it can ruin it all. If you just, unless there's great blocking and there's something, the stories, if you just have like a single shot, it can either work for you or it'll torpedo your whole thing. So, interesting story about Star Trek. There's a company called XO6. This Krug action figure right here is an XO6 figure. It's the best 6th scale Star Trek action figure company that ever was. When they first were coming out, they were going to do 2 different action figures of like the TNG characters. They were going to do figures that had their uniforms were the color they looked when you watched the show, and then they were going to do uniforms of what the actual fabric looked like on the set, because they look different. And certain colors, like a lot of people thought, like one of my favorite Star Trek uniforms is Admiral Kirk's uniform he's wearing at the beginning of Star Trek the Motion Picture. Now, people think that's a gray and white uniform. Well, in reality, that gray is really a green. It's a shade of green. And when I was a kid, I didn't know that. You know, and when they were doing the action figure, the great action, when Mego made a 6th scale version of Star Trek the Motion Picture Kirk, Admiral Kirk, back in 1979, it was gray. But Nanjin Tam, the head of XO6, he comes from the clothing world. He wants to make sure that his uniforms are accurate. But he abandoned the issue of doing both. He makes them screen accurate. And the thing is, the color of lights, gels on lights, change colors that are on costumes and things like that. To me, what's important is how does everything look? And this is a philosophical question when it comes to like building model spaceships. I've been building model spaceship models for a long time. I'm gathering the parts to build. I have half of them now to build like a 4-foot, or whatever it is, 2 feet by 2 feet Millennium Falcon. Now, the thing about the Millennium Falcon is that it's all about the paint job. That model kit that it's the D'Agostini one that you can get from Fanhome now is the greatest model kit of a spaceship ever made. I mean, it really is. But you still have to buy the secondary market parts to make it more accurate, to put more lights in it. And the Millennium Falcon had 3 landing gears and it had 5 landing gears. I mean, it changed over the course of the Star Wars movies. So it comes down to when you are going to make a model of a spaceship, and Star Trek models are big. The pearlescent paints on the refit Enterprise that were repainted by ILM for Star Trek II. What is real? And my go-to position on all of this, including costumes, is you always go toward what it looked like on camera. Like, to me, people want to make an actual prop replica of what the model kit looked like. What did the 8-foot model kit, or what did the 8-foot model of the refit Enterprise actually look like? Well, the funny thing is it's been repainted, so if you don't go with the pearlescent paints from Star Trek the Motion Picture, you got to go with the ILM repaint. It's got, there's a green strong back, there's a blue strong back, there's all. What are you going to do? My whole thing is you want to make it as accurate as it looked on camera. So in my mind, Kirk had green and he had gold. There's gold, blue, and red tunics. There's command, there's sciences, and then there's support. Which Scotty's a red shirt and so are the security guards. That's what you go with. How that looked, how the fabric looked when you weren't on set with the lights, whether it was more of a greenish tint, Kirk had green tunics. There was different green tunics, the wraparounds, and then there was a few. There was the first season one, there's a second season one. But to me, it's green. It's gold. So they're wearing gold. It's a gold velour, and that's what it looks like. So that's what color Kirk's shirt is. But you ask a bigger philosophical question: what is real? And in my mind, any filmmaker worth their salt has to give you something. They have to make you believe. That is one of the key things, especially when you're making a science fiction, fantasy, or horror film. But even if you're doing a romantic comedy, you know, romantic comedies used to, the conventional wisdom was that you had to light a comedy to look like a comedy. It had to be much brighter. You know, comedies had to have a certain look to them to tell the audience they're like a comedy. But when you go back and you watch the first, say, Hangover, or movies like Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, or what Shane Black did with Kiss Kiss Bang Bang and The Nice Guys, the comedy aesthetic changed. It became more naturalistic. But the conventional wisdom was you have to, a comedy has much higher key, like a sitcom. So to make a comedy that was kind of set more in the real world was something they didn't want to do. And it's a very weird thing. I mean, if you're talking about what is real in a movie, it's got to make you believe. And there's some people, like for instance, you know, Godzilla is a great example. The Toho Godzilla franchise. If you go and you watch the Godzilla franchise and then you get to Godzilla -1, the believability factor, like the first Godzilla is because it's black and white, not the Raymond Burr Americanized version, but the original Godzilla subtitled. You know, and the question also is in my mind, I don't watch dubbed movies. Whenever I can, I don't like to watch. There are only two movies that I'll watch dubbed. One is Fantastic Planet, the animated film Fantastic Planet, because I watched it both ways, and I find the dub version only because I'm used to it, and it's the one I saw in the theater from '73. Still one of my favorite, if not my favorite, animated film of all time. I'll watch the dub version of that. The other movie that, and the other movie I will only watch dubbed is Shogun Assassin. Now there are 6 Baby Cart movies, and 2 of them were combined into Shogun Assassin. But if you haven't seen Shogun Assassin and you don't know the Lone Wolf and Cub movies that are based on the manga, first of all, shame on you. There was a TV series as well. But I love the 6 Lone Wolf and Cub movies. I do. Baby Cart at the River Styx rules. But Shogun Assassin. Now, the question is, if you're watching a movie that's subtitled, I think, in a way, to me, subtitling is an extra added step that makes you believe, because it's you're watching something that's in a foreign country, a foreign land. So to watch it dubbed is to not have that reality. But if you watch it dubbed, it seems more real. But it's interesting because, like, if you watch a Hong Kong movie or you watch Italian movies, they shot them without sound. So, like, you'll watch an Italian giallo movie. Some people are speaking in English and some people are speaking in Italian, and then they go because they didn't record sound, and then they redub the movies later. They did that a lot. That kind of takes you out of it. So it's something that you have to learn. Like I said, watching movies is a skill. Like if you're watching giallo movies, Italian giallo from the 60s and 70s, you have to allow for that. You know, you have to learn to train yourself to not be taken out of the fact that people's mouths don't always, whatever they're doing with their mouth doesn't always match the voice. Again, it's a skill. It's a skill. A lot of people bump on that. You know, that's out of sync. That person's clearly not saying what he just said. I know. So it's tough. So what is real? I mean, what is real in movies? You've touched on a philosophical question that is one for the ages. In my mind, when we're trying to do something like with White Devils, again, it's supposed to be set in South Africa in 1988, and a lot of work went into making it feel like it was shot in South Africa in 1988, even though it was not. But you want to make people believe that it is. This is one of the reasons I love the original Star Wars. Sure, you understood, but the visual effects were the best we've ever seen. You go back now, and then people are bitching, oh, Star Wars doesn't look that good. All these idiot pundits talking about a movie that's almost 50 years old from the perspective of today, saying it doesn't look as good. At the time, it was mind-blowing. But one of the things that made it mind-blowing is when they got down to Tatooine, it looked like a shithole, and you believed it. We'd never seen anything like that. The Jawa Soundcrawler was a mess. It was a junkyard on treads. You know, and when you saw the outside of it, how many sandstorms had battered the exterior of that sandcrawler, and you believed, man. Star Wars made you believe because it made you feel. By putting in CG effects, it shattered that verisimilitude. Because, especially when I saw it in 97, when you get into Mos Eisley, I'm like, what is this shit? Because why would you have Mos Eisley is now this huge, sprawling, when before it was just a little shithole, and it ruined the verisimilitude. That's my big objection to, I don't mind Jedi and Empire so much because it's not as egregious, but Star Wars is really egregious. And all of the special effects, and you have CG stuff intercut with live action, it doesn't work. I mean, I look at it because those techniques didn't exist at the time. So the film stocks don't look the same, the color doesn't look the same, the movement isn't the same. Even when you're looking at model shots in the Battle of the Death Star, and then you cut, here's a CG shot of the X-Wings. And I understand there's more dynamic movement, but it takes you out of it. It's very difficult for me to watch that because it's no longer real. A great letter, and the quick answer is it should look like it looks on the screen. You know, perfect movies to me, like the first Alien, with the exception, but it works because you still buy it, with the exception of maybe the 4x3 screens, the computer readouts are a little primitive, but it doesn't matter. Alien, perfect movie. Total verisimilitude. Total, everything there, everything you look at, every direction, you buy it. You believe it, 100%. And talk about world building. The people who are making Strange New Worlds would never be able to do that. They don't know how. They don't even know how to put a camera. They don't even know how to light a scene and make you believe it. And it's very strange. Hello, Rob. This comes from our friend Captain J.T. Kirk. Once again, hello, Rob. Thank you for reading my previous letters so quickly. I want to first apologize for some of the things I said in my last letter. You don't have to apologize. I probably should have kept some of those comments to myself and done a better job at editing. Nah, don't apologize. We're all friends here. Sometimes I tend to speak my mind too much, and in today's environment, that does not always go over so well with some people. Yeah, you should be me. I don't go over with some people a lot. I may have come off sounding like an ass. You did not. I assure you, you did not. But I do not apologize whatsoever regarding my hatred of modern Star Trek and Strange New Worlds. Never give up, never surrender. I've wanted to write and talk to you about my Superman experience since last summer. I was going to send a letter a few months back, but you'd taken down your website. Last summer, Superman was shot where I used to work in downtown Cleveland, Ohio. On my lunch breaks, I would walk out to find where they were shooting just so I could see if I could get a glimpse of David as Superman or anyone else that was in the movie. Unfortunately, I didn't, but I did manage to take a few pics of the surrounding areas they shot the movie in. I know for a fact that my experience of what I got to see were not as good as what others got to see, but I did my best with what I could only, having a lunch hour break each day. With what I could, wait, I read that wrong. I did my best with what I could only have, having an hour lunch break each day. The first place I went to was Superior Avenue, where they turned the Leader apartment building into the exterior of the Daily Planet. It was really cool how they placed huge blocks of concrete in strategic positions to make it look as if the street was torn up. On another day, I watched from a distance as they filmed at the Cleveland Public Square. A lady from the production crew very politely asked me to move out of the way so they could fly drones over the public square. I'm positive that those were for the scenes where Superman and the Justice Gang fought the kaiju. I laughed to myself so hard in the theater when I saw the giant kaiju lying dead in the middle of Cleveland Public Square. This is also the area where the crowd got angry at Superman and chased him into the building that is Key Tower. That was where I used to work. I have to mention that a friend of mine was an extra in the movie and was a part of that crowd scene where Superman was chased into Key. I've seen the movie twice so far, but I have yet to see him in the crowd. So either his scenes were cut or the scenes that he was in went by way too fast. They also shot Superman inside of Key Tower, front entrance doors next to the security desk, the very entrance I would leave to go out on my lunch breaks to the public square almost every day. This is the scene where Superman walks in the entrance and leans in the front of the security desk with his fists on the glass. Then Guy Gardner and the Justice Gang walk in after him. For the longest time, I would wonder why all this translucent green film was plastered all over the windows there. I would ask people about who worked there, but they would not give me a clear answer. I always suspected it was for the movie. Then one day I saw them preparing to shoot, so I got my definitive answer. I have to admit that the day they shot that scene, I came downstairs and snuck to some places that I was not supposed to go unnoticed. It's amazing to me how much equipment, people, and resources that are used for just that one scene. That part is used only for a few minutes, if that. When they stopped filming the movie and it wrapped up, I have to admit I was a bit sad to see it all end. For about a month, I could not wait for my lunch break to come so I could go out and see whatever I could possibly see. Suddenly, life turned back to those normal, boring lunch breaks. But this experience did make me even more excited to see the film next year in 2025. Jump ahead a year later. I was lucky enough to get a ticket with a good seat to the early Amazon screening in IMAX on July 8th. I then went down to see it for a second time with my girlfriend. It was fun to point out to her all the scenes shot in downtown Cleveland and all the landmarks we both recognized. All in all, I really did like and enjoy seeing Superman on the big screen. I do agree with you that the film does feel a bit too short. I wanted more. Regardless, I can't wait to see what's more to come with this new DC universe. Henry Cavill is still my favorite Superman, and Man of Steel is still my favorite Superman movie. And all in all, this was a great fun experience that I will always remember every time I watch this 2025 movie iteration. Your friend from another reality, Captain J.T. Kirk. Another letter, sir. I loved it. And, you never have to apologize. You're among friends. You never have to apologize. This letter, back to Star Trek, comes to us from Jim Coleman. Jim Coleman writes in and says, "Hi, Robert. My name is Jim Coleman, and I decided to write you this letter about my experience with Star Trek and how I became such a big fan." Oh, well, let's sit back and why don't we all take a swig? These are really good. I'm 56 now, and my story begins around 1977, the year Star Wars hit theaters. Early on, I was more a fan of superheroes like Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, Fantastic Four. Well, you get the picture. I loved playing with my Mego figures of the time, making up my own adventures, and using my imagination. I watched the 66 Batman series and the animated 60s Spider-Man, and I loved them. Then one day, at school, a friend told me of a UHF channel. I believe Channel 52 here in the IE area where I lived. I don't know where that is. Maybe, hang on, let me just jump down to the end. He doesn't say. IE area which I lived. It was called Kids Power TV and consisted of Kimba the White Lion, the Banana Splits, tra-la-la-la-la-la-la, uh-oh, Chongo, it's Danger Island next, Johnny Quest, and my soon-to-be ultimate favorites, uh-oh, Ultraman, and Johnny Sacco and his giant robot. These two shows were the first time I'd really been introduced to science fiction. I became obsessed with them, especially Ultraman, although I couldn't find any toys, so I would convert my Mego Batman figure into Ultraman and have many adventures. My mother gave me one of my dad's Bic cigarette lighters that no longer worked, and I would use that as my beta capsule to turn into Ultraman. I also became a big fan of Godzilla and wishing there could be a Godzilla and Ultraman crossover where they together save the Earth against alien invaders. What happened when you first saw Godzilla vs. Megalon and met Jet Jaguar? I can remember my first glance at Star Trek on TV, which would be I'd be running out the door to play and my dad would have it on the weekends, and he'd try and get me to watch it, but all I would see is people walking around hallways with funny colored shirts and didn't interest me at first. Watching my shows one day, I saw a preview for something called Star Wars, and it really did blow my mind. It looked really cool to my 8-year-old self. Star Wars was released in theaters and became a giant phenomenon. The summer ended, my parents still hadn't taken me to see it. What? I remember the first day of school, and all everyone was talking about was Star Wars. Some kids had already seen it 5, 10, 15 times. I was so excited that I finally was able to talk my parents into seeing it, and it changed my childhood forever. I became such a big fan of the movie that all my Megos were soon replaced with Star Wars action figures from Kenner, and my imagination had infinite possibilities now. Everything Star Wars was now my new obsession and led me to explore more science fiction. But I still hadn't found my true love yet. But Star Wars was playing a giant part, a stepping stone, you could say. Then in 1979, tons of new sci-fi movies hit the theaters. Maybe the greatest year of my childhood. Buck Rogers in the 25th Century. People forget the pilot. That Buck Rogers first aired. They took the pilot and put it in theaters. Buck Rogers in the 25th Century, and it had all the girls writhing on the title of the movie. Far Beyond the World. Anyway. Alien, The Black Hole, and Star Trek The Motion Picture. December 7th, 1979, my dad took us to go see Star Trek The Motion Picture at the Montclair Plaza Theater. And as we got closer to the theater, it was very apparent that the lines were wrapped across the parking lot. It was sold out, and I was extremely disappointed. I'm sure my dad was, as he had been watching Star Trek for years, but I wasn't familiar with the TV series. The relationship with my dad and I was a complicated one because he really wasn't a hands-on dad. We were really much different kinds of people. He was a blue-collar worker who liked his beer and liked going to bars with my mother. The one thing he did like was science fiction movies and Star Trek. I was just starting to find my love for this genre, and this movie was a turning point. My dad could see how disappointed I was not getting to see this big movie event, so he did something unprecedented. He promised me that he would take me to the first show the following morning. Just him and I. This was the first and last time I went to the movies with only my dad. This is one of my fondest memories with my father. Some people might think that's sad, but not me. It was a double great day. Star Trek The Motion Picture was great, and bonding with my dad over it was just as great. This is a memory I will always remember, and it finally inspired me to watch all the original TV episodes. I came to find out that Star Trek was not just about the visuals and effects, but about thought-provoking stories and great characters for the ages. Captain Kirk became the greatest father figure for me, and I really wanted to strive to be great, like him. I even became obsessed with phasers and the equipment used on the show. In the Christmas of 1979, I got the Star Trek Mego Enterprise playset with a Kirk and Spock action figure along with the Jerry Goldsmith soundtrack record from the movie. That's my idea of that's a good Christmas. It was a great way to end the year. Star Trek has meant a lot to me over the years, and I've always gone to see the motion picture every time it's screened at the theater. And the director's cut's phenomenal. I love all the original Star Trek films and most of the Next Generation ones as well, but Star Trek The Motion Picture is by far my favorite one. Not to mention one of my favorite sci-fi movies of all time, because I think it's just a great sci-fi story. You, sir, and I park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay, or should I say travel pods. Yes, I love Star Trek The Motion Picture. I loved it then. I love it even more now. So with all that said, speaking of modern Star Trek, I can't imagine many of those characters would be something for a kid like I was to look up to. I can't imagine a world where there's no Kirk, Spock, or McCoy as we know them to emulate or dream of becoming. Some of those original characters and shows changed people's lives, including mine. Unfortunately, I fear the greatness of the original shows, movie, and characters will never be duplicated again in the Star Trek universe. I do want to add that because of you, I ran out and bought Picard Season 3 on Blu-ray, and I loved it. Might be the last great Star Trek we'll ever get. I hope not. Anyway, I just wanted to share this with you and hope you find it at least somewhat interesting. I love what you do, and I really enjoy watching your shows live. And like you, I wish there was more positivity in the world and amongst fandom. Live long and prosper for great Star Trek. And that comes to us from Jim Coleman. Jim, what a great letter. You know, but you bring up a good point. The reason I think that Star Trek became so influential, especially amongst college students of the day, and when it went into strip syndication in 1972, is that it showed a group of people, a diverse group of people, that their diversity was par for the course. That was the future, but they were all really good at their jobs. There was a level of competency, a level of understanding, a level of humanity, and yes, even in Spock, And these were people that you wanted to be or be around. You hoped that you were going to grow up someday and be a part of this. You know, Scotty, no matter what was going on, if the Enterprise was in trouble, Scotty could fix it for you because he was that smart. Spock would use logic and help you understand what a situation was all about. Kirk was able to use all these different things and figure out a plot or a path through whatever he had to go through to achieve his goals. Everybody was really good, and they were at the top of their game. You had to be the best of the best to be on a Constitution-class starship out in the far-flung galaxy. Nowadays, Star Trek is not about people that are the best at their jobs. Modern Star Trek has turned everybody into people that we relate to. They're not people that you're do you aspire? I mean, Spock flagrantly jumps from one crew member to another. You know, you wouldn't see fraternization amongst the crew in classic Star Trek because that would seriously, I mean, I'm sure it went on, but it would compromise in the original series. You had all these people that were making it that were actually World War II veterans. So there is no credibility. One of the big problems with modern Star Trek is no one knows how to write any kind of Star Trek. Is people will tell you that, oh, Gene Roddenberry said it's not militaristic. Okay, yes, it was. That's why they use military ranks, you know. And while it might not be wartime, and they were explorers, they still had discipline. So, yeah, that is not understood. There's no the captain's asking people, well, what do you think I should do? What do you think I should do? There's no credibility. There's no believability. And Anson Mount, what's really interesting is they've given us these characters that talk in like Star Trek-ism. If there's a Star Trek language, it's a fake language because it's people think these characters talk that way without really understanding how they really do talk. They write weird Star Trek, what they think are weird Star Trek speeches. Look at Holly Hunter's go back and watch the Strange New World, the Starfleet Academy trailer. And you have Holly Hunter is giving this speech. And we've heard variations on this theme. The people that wrote that think that this is Star Trek speak. They're like, in Star Trek, at some point, every captain or every leader talks this way. Which is weird. I mean, there have been great speeches. Kirk has talked computers to death. Picard's given great speeches. The drumhead has a great speech. But not everybody busts out their words of wisdom and speaks this way. I understand it's an incoming classroom and we're going to inspire everybody, but now all the people that make Star Trek now, it's all cliche. Everything is cliche. And the fact that they would rather lean into interpersonal relationships like Spock and Nurse Chapel, why is that a thing? Why are we not telling it? When was the last time you saw really compelling, fascinating? We live in a world where you can open up, you can read the news, and you can find 10 different fascinating scientifically based news stories, and you could write a science fiction show about any one of those things. You know, it's like what Peter Gallagher was saying in Robert Altman's The Player. He pulls out the newspaper and he goes, look, you put Jimmy Smits in it and you have a sexy stand and deliver. You know, talking about kids living in South Central LA that are underprivileged and they have a great teacher that helps them, lifts them out of poverty or whatever. And there's your story. Stand and deliver. Lean on me. Whatever. Coach Carter. You're done. There's your movie. No one is... We're getting a gimmick episode set in a holodeck where they're making fun of Star Trek. They don't know how to write a Star Trek story. They don't know how to write a really interesting science fiction action adventure allegory that has something to say to us today. It's wild. I mean, you watch this stuff and you're like, wow, man, where's the science fiction in this? It's all warmed over, regurgitated. It's like all the writers of Star Trek are little birds and their parents had to chew up their food and spit it into their mouths. It's a really horribly written show. And the fact that it's Star Trek, written clearly by people who've never watched Star Trek, sure, you'll get the exception. You'll get a Kirsten Beyer or something to come in and write an episode, but It's the people that are in control. Alex Kurtzman never watched Star Trek before he worked on Star Trek 09 and Star Trek Into Darkness. And you can tell. And he still hasn't. And if he did, he watched 10 episodes. And that guy's controlling the Star Trek franchise. Think about it. If I was a bean counter at a studio, would I let a guy like that take over my franchise? I mean, Kevin Feige produced 14 Marvel movies before he even started the MCU. He was a producer or worked in a producer. He already was a huge fan. And by the way, he's a huge Star Trek fan. He was already a fan of these things before he worked. He worked for Richard Donner as an intern, as a young whippersnapper. But then he worked on Raimi's Spider-Man, Bryan Singer's X-Men. He worked on Daredevil. He worked on Elektra. He worked on The Good, the Bad, Ghost Rider. He saw how Marvel movies could work really well and how they didn't work so well. 14 movies, including, people forget, Man-Thing. The Man-Thing movie that Brett Leonard directed. People always forget that one. But 14 movies before he took over and became the impresario that ran the MCU. God, what I would give for somebody who's working on Star Trek to have that pedigree. They've never hired anybody. And look, and I don't think necessarily somebody has to have written or watched Star Trek first. But they do. Nicholas Meyer didn't. They do have to understand classical storytelling. They have to be storytelling masters. They have to have a great knowledge of what makes great storytelling. Not people that came up working on Xena and Hercules. And, it's silly to say this, but Star Trek in its current form is a perfect example, metaphorically, of everything wrong with the United States right now. If you want to look at it that way. Institutional knowledge is gone. Everybody wants to make excuses for their failures. No one is going to... Where are the people that are going to rise up? Rising up. Where are the people that are going to rise up and take the bull by the horns and solve our problems? That are going to get up and say, we know what to do. We're going to lead you into the promised land. Not just half of you, but all of you. And the people that are making modern Star Trek, they don't like Star Trek. They think they can do something that's better by ripping off Joss Whedon. Go figure. Irony of ironies. We're going to overlook that. Here's another one. Here's another letter. Actually, let me see if anyone's sent in any more super chats or tips. Let's see where we are. Let's see. Another View 9 says, oh, wait, hang on. 1001 Johnny says, the next best thing to going to Japan, Rob, is watching Ultraman. One episode wouldn't be hard. I'll give you suggestions per every Trek rant. I got you, bro. 1001 Johnny loves Ultraman as much as I love, probably more than I love Star Trek. It's amazing. Another View says, hey, Rob, Weapons is my most anticipated movie in a very long time. The marketing has been phenomenal, totally. I'm seeing it first showing on Thursday. I can't wait to hear your spoiler discussion. I always appreciate your commentary. Well, thanks, first of all, for your support. I can't wait to see Weapons. I cannot wait. An original horror film written and directed by an auteur. We're getting a lot. This has been a great year for horror. Great year for horror. And, Weapons is truly original, and I can't wait to see what people think about it. Real Thomas Logan says, did you ever get your hands on Noah Hawley's Star Trek 4 script? I did not. If so, tell us about it. Hawley's unproduced Doctor Doom script is a fucking masterpiece. I have not got my hands on that either. I never looked for that. I should look for those things because I'm a big fan of Noah Hawley. I don't even know if he actually finished writing a script for Star Trek 4, to be honest. Stan Huddycutt has become a new member. And that Starship Sailed has become a new member, or upgraded their membership to PGS Hero. Thanks for that. B Thing says, I hope you like me reading your letter. I hope that was okay. They don't get that Spock is sarcastic and condescending, unlike Data. And that would have only been worse when he was younger. Yeah, this idea that Spock isn't the guy we met is so ridiculous. That's such a silly, bizarre thing to say. It's not good. Racky's Wolfstar says, writing-wise, for $20, thank you, by the way. Writing-wise, Spock's romances in Strange New Worlds falter due to a lack of male characters. With a mostly female cast and Pike taken, Spock is awkwardly cast as the ladies' man, which doesn't suit him. Plus, Spock would not get involved with his crew members because it would compromise his ability to do his job properly. He wouldn't do it. This weird idea they've made Spock this sex symbol. I understand Ethan Peck without a shirt on is very impressive. I wish I looked like that. I can't put in that time, but maybe I should. I don't know. Getting a little thick around the middle. Looking like Ethan Peck's Spock. Got to get rid of the chin, right? Ethan Peck's Spock. He's a great actor. He's given shit to play. I mean, it's unbelievable how everyone... It's so ridiculous how they've made him so terrible. 1001 Johnny says, does this count as 2 rants, Rob, in one trek, in one stream? I already have 2 Ultraman recommendations. If this is getting too much, I'll stop. Never stop. You got to keep those running jokes running. But yeah, I mean, the romances with Spock is bizarre. I mean, it doesn't really make much sense. 1001 Johnny also sends in a tip and says, what is real in film? Should it be what we can imagine? That is to say, if we watch Casablanca, we see real people and can believe their situation. But if we watch Zardoz, we need to use our own imagination to believe what we behold. I would say that Zardoz is absolutely believable. I believe it. I believe it because of the way it's shot. Jeffrey Unsworth, it's all kinds of crazy. But I believe Zardoz. I really do. A lot of people might not, and I understand that. But I do. I believe in it. I do. I believe in Zardoz. So I think I'm caught up, and I have another letter from Damian Woods. Hi, Rob. I hope you're well. I've been ruminating recently how fortunate I had it growing up in the 80s and 90s. Not only was I there at the birth of the iconic franchises like Indiana Jones, Terminator, and Predator, but also great sequels like The Empire Strikes Back. I was lucky enough to be introduced to the wonders of Star Wars and Superman. I was there for Tim Burton's Batman and the Wachowskis' Matrix, not to mention Back to the Future, Aliens, RoboCop, and Jurassic Park. What a time to be alive. Unfortunately, there's another side of that coin. Getting older, like we all are, has also meant I've seen most of these franchises, not all, thankfully, get systematically ruined. It's quite an experience to have your young sense of wonder wither. I was going to say and die, but I'm not. There are sparks out there of wonder returning in a big way, like DC Studios, Project Hail Mary, Masters of the Universe, and Avatar. But one of the best or worst examples of wonder being quashed is Star Trek. I don't need... By the way, I just took a sample of all the letters that came in. I didn't just pick Star Trek-related letters. Is Star Trek. I don't need to tell you how badly this franchise, along with Doctor Who, has been well and truly fucked over. I didn't grow up with the original series, but what I did grow up with was TNG on TV and the original cast movies on video and in the cinema. Best of both worlds, if you will. I enjoyed Voyager and DS9, but Enterprise got away from me. When it was announced that J.J. Abrams was being given a huge budget to bring Star Trek back in 2009, I was so excited. If I'm honest, I'd enjoyed the movies to a point, but I had to think of them more as action movies than as pure Star Trek. But it's what happened to Star Trek after that has made me frustrated and downright angry. I couldn't get through Picard Season 1. It was awful. I didn't get back to it until Season 3. Thank you, Terry Metalis. I tried watching Discovery and I couldn't get through it. Section 31, the trailer was enough to tell me it was not for me. When Strange New Worlds was coming out, I kept hearing, this is Star Trek. It's back to how it used to be. I lasted 2 episodes. As you have said many times, these writers know nothing. Their life experience is so insular, so singular, so self-focused, they can't write anything outside of their own bubble. Their emotional literacy is basically nil. Have any of them ever opened a book? Have they ever read science fiction? If anything, I imagine they might have read the blurb on the back but not bothered to actually look inside. I'm just hoping that there are writers out there who are willing to do some serious research, or are at least willing and able to look outside of their bubbles and write something for everyone other than just themselves. Do you think it's possible? I really hope it is. Thanks as always for your thoughts and observations, Rob. All the best, Damo. Well, Damo, you said it. You know, science fiction is a literary genre. It is a genre of ideas. It's looking at things and making them up. You know, and extrapolating upon, like, okay, what would happen if a computer? What would happen if a man's brain was replaced by a computer? Kind of a simple, easy idea. But what would happen? Now, if you were to ask, well, some people, I think the people that make Strange New Worlds would say, well, he could compute math problems very fast. But really, if his mind was replaced with a computer, the question that I would ask would be, does he still have a soul? Does he still have his intellect? And if he didn't, what would that do to him? What would that do to his sense of self? This is a very simple idea, but by asking these questions, you suddenly come up with a science fiction story. You know, take your pick. I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, you think about it now, the very last episode of Star Trek, the original series, was Turnabout Intruder. And with an alien device, a woman, her essence, her soul, so to speak, Janice Lester, transposed herself and stole Kirk's essence and put Kirk into her body, and she was put into Shatner's body. Now, in this day and age, with all this talk about, say, trans and all that, I would think it would be really interesting. I read a book by, there's this author team, they stopped writing together, but they wrote great splatterpunk novels, great horror novels. John Skipp and Craig Spector. Their first book was called The Light at the End. It was a vampire story. Their second book was called The Cleanup. Their third book was called The Scream. The Scream is a masterpiece of splatterpunk horror. It really is. It's about a heavy metal rock band that's really from hell. It sounds silly. You got to read it. Their books are great. But in The Cleanup, there's a scene where a woman, she's a lesbian, if I remember correctly. If I get this wrong, I did read these books for the first time in the 80s. She gets turned. It's a horrifying scene. Her body is altered, and she gets turned into a man. And in the context, it's a horror novel. In the context of the book, it's horrifying. Or it's horrifying for her. But that would be a really interesting way. Like, you could do a really interesting story about somebody with gender dysmorphia who do a great story in a science fiction context. Turnabout Intruder is not a great story like that. But, you know, what is it like? Like, I saw a video of a trans, a woman, a trans man, a woman that transitioned to being a man. And it's a very sad video. And in this video, this person, I think it's on YouTube, was talking about they had no idea how lonely it can be to be a man. And I don't know, it's a really, I watched this video, it was really affecting to me, and it stuck with me, and they had no idea. You know, you're concentrating on your gender, and you're concentrating on yourself, but you haven't thought it through, like, what's the rest of the world like? Say you totally pass and nobody knows that you've transitioned, that you've truly transitioned, and you're now a trans man, you were born as a biological woman, but now you're a man and nobody knows it. You're just a man. And this person was lamenting how lonely, that they had no idea, because it doesn't come up in the conversation. The reality of being a man in our world is something that you don't necessarily consider, especially as you get older. I always thought there's a story. Like, how do you make a story about that? Like, somebody transitions and thinks that they've discovered they are their true self finally, but then they realize that they now live in a world where they thought they were going to be happy, but it's the world itself that now is the problem. And then what do you do? You know, I have a friend, one of the most beautiful women I've ever met in my life, who was a girlfriend of mine in high school. You know, I was madly in love with her, but I didn't know how to deal with my emotions. And she's still one of the most beautiful women. She went to some party a couple weeks ago and wore this dress. It was unbelievable. She's just amazing. She's very striking looking. And she told me a story, like, she's used to being a very attractive woman, but she told me a story, I want to say, like, I don't know, 10 years ago, you know, around the time we were both turned 50. She's a year younger than me. And she told me this story that she went into a bar, and, like, she's a lawyer. She goes into a bar, and in the bar was a very handsome guy, and she sits down kind of next to him in the bar. And then at the end of the bar, there were two younger, very, very attractive girls. And this guy, now my friend, who's incredible, her name's Marina. She's an incredibly beautiful woman. The guy at the bar didn't even pay any attention to her, like, and bought the girls at the end of the bar drinks. And she told me this. She told me this story. She goes, I've now reached a point in my life where I'm invisible. And I when she was telling me that, because she's a very beautiful woman, and people are always, you know, you would, but beautiful not in a California way. She's from Russia originally, in a very interesting way. But she had to deal with the fact that the world, the universe that she inhabited, changed underneath her. And the things that she was so used to having, you know, men pay attention to her, men buy her drinks, whatever, is gone. And I thought, when she told me this story, I'm like, that's the great basis for a story. Now, I was thinking about it from a horror perspective. What happens when a woman's identity, her public-facing persona, or whatever, the things that what happens when that's taken away from her? She doesn't even know it's gone. And then, you know, it's like Repulsion. If you've ever seen a Roman Polanski movie, Repulsion, so Catherine Deneuve is this woman. She's so beautiful, she can't go anywhere without being harassed by men. They're basically drooling all over her wherever she goes. And she can't stand men. And it makes her go a little funny in the head. It's a great movie. You should watch it. It's you know, despite what you might think of Roman Polanski, it's a great film. Great horror film, really, but it's terrifying. And to me, there's where you find great genre stories. You know, in these tales, like people losing their identity. That's a great basis for a science fiction story. You know, somebody that transitions and they find happiness, but then they realize the universe they live in, they never anticipated that the world itself would make them unhappy, because they didn't know all of the ramifications of what they've done, and they can't go back. You know, that's a science. You can turn that into a science fiction story, and those are the great stories that Star Trek used to deal with. You know, it was those kinds of stories. They would take very human stories, or they would take a situation and extrapolate it into a science fiction story. The people that are making Star Trek don't know how to do that. All they can do is fall back into romance or goofy stories or whatever. They don't know how to extrapolate events or situations and turn them into science fiction and make them relevant to us. You know, again, I keep mentioning it. With all this Spock bullshit, with all this, now he's going to go out with Spock's going to go out with Khan Noonien Singh's great granddaughter, and you're supposed to believe that it's our Spock, and you've ruined Space Seed. You know, your great granddaughter. I hate that. I mean, it's so annoying to watch that on Star Trek. But watch a first season original series episode. I keep saying it. This Side of Paradise. This Side of Paradise is infinitely more interesting and mature, especially when it comes to dealing with Spock in a relationship. It is infinitely better than any of the fucking ridiculous hogwash they've been, you know, giving us. It's very, very frustrating. It's very frustrating. And, yeah, I mean, and you can tell they haven't read science fiction novels. They haven't read, because great science fiction is constantly extrapolating about everything. There hasn't been one. We live in a world where quantum computing is going to happen. What is that going to mean? And there's nothing. There's no science fiction. There's no speculation about the world that we live in on modern Star Trek anymore. There's nothing there. And when it does come, you can tell they haven't read. Like there was the concept of that big giant entity in Star Trek Discovery, and you're like, these people have never read a science fiction story. They've got a science fiction concept without knowing how to make a science fiction story. It's wild. It's wild to watch. It's bizarre. Anyway, yeah, it's incredibly frustrating. What are you gonna do? So what are you gonna do? I just don't know. Castle Grace Skull says, "What color wig should I wear? I missed you." Well, that's up to you. Well, to go with the question that's right below, you gotta look up the trailer, watch the opening credits, credits for UFO, the TV series UFO, and get a purple wig. My Tigger the Tiger says, "I'm 27 years old and I never found modern Trek of my generation to be any good. Find me someone who can make an episode like Duet or Emissary from Deep Space Nine. There's no depth or care in new Star Trek." That is a great idea. That's a great concept. Emissary, I think Emissary, there's an argument to be made that Emissary is the best Star Trek pilot. You could actually make that argument, or at least the best modern Star Trek pilot. Great stuff in there. And Duet is the penultimate episode of the first season of Deep Space Nine, and it's almost a 2-character play. Unbelievable episode. And if you watch Duet or Emissary, those are both episodes that are functioning on a level that is way beyond anything modern Star Trek has given us. They think that making people whisper and talk in platitudes is somehow deep. They don't know how to tell those kinds of stories because they've never experienced those stories. They've only ever watched TV, and they come from relationship dramas. I mean, the co-showrunner of Star Trek Strange New Worlds was a writer on the Carrie Diaries, the Sex and the City prequel. Other than The Magicians, he hasn't written a lot of, and it's not so great. Stan Honeycutt asks, why hasn't the early 70s UFO series been rebooted? Well, it's funny you say that because Bill Hunt and I wrote a proposal to do just that. And for those of you who don't know, Jerry Anderson of Super Mario Nation fame, he created like Supercar, Joe 90, the Thunderbirds, Captain Scarlet, Stingray. He also did Space 1999, but his first live-action series was a 26-episode science fiction show that was made between 1969 and 1971 called UFO. And it's one of my favorite sci-fi shows of all time. And UFO is an incredible... I mean, I'd say it's incredible because it's... I mean, I love it. I love it. It's not for everybody, but it's a 26-episode show, and the premise is that Earth is being clandestinely attacked by an alien race, and they have come here. They're a dying race, and they've come here, and they basically kidnap human beings and use them to extend their life. They take our body parts because they're dying. And there is an organization called Shadow, the Supreme Headquarters Alien Defense Organization, that is it's financed by all the countries around the world. They're a secret organization. They're the only people that know, other than the very highest up people in the governments around the world, that this is happening. And they're fighting a lonely, clandestine war against these aliens trying to protect Earth. And they have submarines, they have a moon base, they have their main headquarters is underneath a movie studio, which is a great conceit because they can use the back lot and they can actually use the studio and sound stages as part of the show. But their main headquarters is underneath a movie studio, and Ed Straker, who commands Shadow, masquerades as a movie executive that runs a motion picture studio. No, I'm not kidding. And if you saw it as a kid, just go, if you've never heard of it or you haven't seen it before, go to YouTube and watch, just type in UFO theme song. and watch the opening credits. That'll tell you everything you need to know about the show. As a matter of fact, this is a moon base interceptor, and these are secreted in craters on the moon. They rise up to the exterior, and they take off from moon craters. They're launched 3 together, and they fire these torpedoes at the alien UFOs, and then they have guns on the front. And like every it's funny, I have this sitting here, and it's one of my favorite things. And I think our reboot of UFO, the Bible that we wrote, sort of, and the story ideas we came up with, I think it was really great. And it still is great. It takes place in 2030. The original UFO TV series, even though it was made in 69 to 71, it's set in 1980, although they do flashbacks to 1970 as well. And if you find UFO, here's what you should do. You should, okay, here's what you got to do. If you're only going to watch 3 episodes of UFO, and I'm getting autistic, and to see if it's for you, you got to watch them in this order, because the show is not in any particular order. I mean, there's some continuity, but watch the episode Confetti Check A-OK first. Then watch what was the first episode of the show, Identified, second. And then watch A Question of Priorities. Those 3 episodes. So Confetti Check A-OK, Identified, and A Question of Priorities. And I guarantee you that if that's it's now, remember, the show is made, it's a little slower, there's a slower pace in all of that, but it'll kick you in the teeth when you get to the end of that episode. So, yeah, check that out. But yeah, I would love to reboot that series. Again, if I could make anything for TV, that would be right at the top. If someone said, Rob, what IP would you reboot? And I would reboot UFO. And it would, UFO, the first series, would be continuity, kind of like Game of Thrones. You know, they talked about other stuff. We would refer back to the continuity of the original UFO, but UFO spanned 1970 to 1980, and our show would be set in 2030, and we would fill in the blanks. Or maybe we would expand it and make it go a little further. We wrote this thing like 10 years ago. But man, would I love to do that. Wayne E42 says, hello, Rob. I've been following you for a long time. I dig what you do, and we agree on most things. I'll send a letter one day. Did I miss your thoughts on Fantastic Four First Steps? I didn't really review it. I mean, I liked it. I didn't love it. I really liked it. I liked everything I watched. I saw. I loved the characters. I love how the world was portrayed. I loved Galactus. Oh, it was so great. I wanted, like with Superman, I wish the movie was, as we know, Fantastic Four, of all the Marvel movies, it was the one that was tested the most because they needed to get it right. My thing with Fantastic Four, I would have loved for it to have been a half an hour longer and explored more of the world. Because, like with Superman, these things are cut to the bone. We like characters. You know, we like those character moments talking to each other where they have catchphrases or they say something funny, you know, leave the gun, take the cannoli. You need moments where, and it felt like in both Superman and Fantastic Four, they cut everything down to the bone. So each conversation served to move the plot forward, but it didn't give you enough of the delicious character interaction that makes us love characters. And I'll give you an example. In Iron Man 1, when we meet Tony Stark and he's in his Humvee and he's driving to his weapons demonstration, the Stark demonstration, you have the moment in the back of the Humvee where he's talking to the soldiers. And he's saying, can we take a picture, Mr. Stark? And he's like, don't throw gang signs. And he's like, no, it doesn't matter. Go throw gang signs. And you see Tony Stark interacting with these soldiers. And it is a moment where we're getting to know this guy. And there's a lot of that in Iron Man 1, where you see, if they had made Iron Man 1 now, they would have cut that scene out. You would have just had the establishment of wherever they were going, and you'd have the Humvee pull up, and Tony Stark would get out of the Humvee, and he would do his presentation. But it was the moment with those soldiers that humanized him. Immediately, you love Tony Stark. You love him because of his interaction with those soldiers. He's snarky, he's funny, he's rich, he's brash. You know who that character is, and you like him already. Nowadays, with these everyone's like, these superhero movies are too long, and it doesn't matter how long a movie is. If it's character based and you are in, you're in. You just have to know. It's a tough thing to know. I think both Fantastic Four and Superman could have benefited. Also, another thing about Fantastic Four that kind of bothered me, the world seemed small. The Baxter Building is this gigantic building that they seem to inhabit the penthouse floor. There's a couple of rooms. What's in the rest of the building? Like, if the Fantastic Four are the world's only protectors, I mean, you got a little bit of it, but I would have thought that they would have had, like, the Baxter Building is full of all the people that work for the Fantastic Four, and they're monitoring the whole planet. Like, Reed Richards has probably a bunch of patents of stuff he's invented, and the entire Baxter Building is everybody that works for them. And you would have a whole international conglomerate of people that are making sure if there's a problem around the world, the Fantastic Four know. I would have liked to have seen more of that. It felt like the Fantastic Four protected the Earth, but mostly they protected Midtown Manhattan. But other than that, these are small nitpicks. I really enjoyed watching. I thought Fantastic Four was actually a great science fiction movie. It had a great moral and ethical dilemma at the center of it. I thought the portrayal of Galactus was terrific. I liked the fact that Johnny Storm had this thing with Silver Surfer, with Shia LaBeouf, because it made sense. I liked the fact that each one of those characters had their own deal, and the fact that they really felt like a family and a team, and they all contributed. There was a lot to love, but I wanted to like it more than I did. I wanted more. I want more. I wanted, like, Kirsten Dunst in Interview with a Vampire. But I liked it. I didn't love it. I liked it. I felt the same way about it as when I saw Captain America: The First Avenger for the first time. But then I came to love Captain America: The First Avenger. So I need to go back and see it again. And when Wayne says we agree on most things, what don't we agree with? I'm always curious about that. Sci-fi Extremist said, I saw a comment and I wanted to get your thoughts on it. Marvel is to Star Trek as DC is to Star Wars. I think on the surface it's a fair assessment, meant to be real life versus meant to be make-believe. Yeah, I could see that. I mean, obviously the DC characters are more Silver Agey, and Marvel was more grounded. I mean, I don't think that DC, up until the 80s, like Dark Knight Returns, I don't think you would have seen a DC graphic novel like the X-Men graphic novel God Loves, Man Kills. Really, I mean, DC was kind of, I love the Neil Adams, I love the Green Arrow, Green Lantern stories in the 70s, and there's a lot of great Batman stories and things like that. But Marvel sort of leaned into, Marvel's characters were more gods, were more either demigods or more street level characters, Peter Parker, for instance, whereas the DC characters were more godlike. Although the Teen Titans, when they came out with that comic, when they did the new Teen Titans with George Perez and Marv Wolfman, they really were able to capture that formula. That's why they did the X-Men Teen Titans crossover with Darkseid and Dark Phoenix. But I think that's probably true. Marvel is to Star Trek, but you know what though? But I would also say that the Star Trek characters, in a way, were very DC, which is why DC had the Star Trek comics. I think IDW has probably beat them now. But at the time when Star Trek was given the license to Star Trek was acquired by DC, and they had it from like 83 up to 96 or something. It's interesting that DC took it over. Marvel had it Marvel had it after Star Trek The Motion Picture, and then after DC, then Marvel took it over, but they were never very successful. Although Marvel did do a really good Captain Pike, the early Voyages Pike comic was better than Strange New Worlds. But that's a good comic. Indiana Jake said, Rob, did you see that MCU list from Variety? Ooh, no, I have not. I don't even know what that is. Let's see. MCU list, Variety. MCU list. Let's see. Oh, MCU ranking. Marvel Studios movies and shows ranked. Oh, this is from today. Well, since you asked, let's take a look at it. Hold on. Let me. I mean, it's only 9:24. I've only been. Wow, that means this show's been going on for 3.5 hours. Why not a little more? Who cares? Let's do it. Let's bring this up. And I have to. Sorry, this is scintillating YouTube. I'll bring it up. I have to edit the shot. See, this is not just Zoom software. This is actually like a live studio in a box. So I'm going to edit this shot. I'm going to bring up this article, and I'm going to see this with you. And this is going to be interesting. Where's the Marvel series and shows ranked worst to best? Okay, now I've got this, and now I have to fix it. Let's okay, there we go. Okay, I should have done this in a different thing. I've got this in. Hang on. I know, scintillating YouTube thing. I mean, it has been going on for 3 hours, this show, so you got to give me a little bit of a break. I've got to go bring it out here. Still too big. Okay. So here we go. Here it is. I think it's live. There we go. Variety. Ranking the shows. Sorry, it's kind of off. Let's see what this is. Ranking the MCU, every Marvel Studios movie and show from worst to best. By Kate Arthur, Angelique Jackson, Haley Klug, Jordan Moreau, and Adam B. Very. I'll read this. Since 2008, Marvel Studios has released 37 feature films, 15 streaming series, and 2 TV specials, all of it knitted together within the unprecedented narrative tapestry known as the Marvel Cinematic Universe. With its latest movie, The Fantastic Four: First Steps, the company has gone back to its roots, bringing the inaugural creation of Stan Lee and Jack Kirby into the MCU, so it seemed fitting to look back at the entirety of the history-making creative endeavor and rank every title from worst to best. 54, Secret Invasion. You know what? I was so excited for this. It was a crushing disappointment on every level. I agree with that. Let's just do a quick... Thor: The Dark World. Nope. I would put Thor: Love and Thunder right there. But okay. Alan Taylor just wasn't into directing it. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. You know what? Not much of an argument there. Moon Knight. Again, not much of an argument there. I mean, you know, I love Moon Knight, but boy, did they did my boy wrong. Thor: Love and Thunder. Good. Okay. I'm so far... The Incredible Hulk 2008. Nah, I think this movie's better than that, but I'm going to go with it. Okay. So far, not bad. Iron Man 2. I'm an Iron Man 2 apologist. I think it should be higher, but all right. Echo. There's no way that Echo is better than Iron Man 2. I'm sorry. It's not. Eternals should be higher. I'm an Eternals apologist as well, but okay. Captain America: Brave New World. I got to say, it's a snooze fest. Falcon and Winter Soldier, I think it's better, but okay, you're gonna have it there. What If? Okay, inconsequential animated. Avengers: Age of Ultron, fuck you. Avengers: Age of Ultron's way better than that. 42. This movie gets year after year after year. You're wrong there. Work by Night again deserves to be much higher. Thor at number 40. Thor was an amazing... The fact that Thor worked as well as it did was amazing, and you should not diss Thor. Kenneth Branagh directing it was a brilliant stroke. She-Hulk Attorney at Law is not better than Thor. It's not better than Thor. That's just silly. This show sucked. It should have been great. The writing was terrible. Ant-Man and the Wasp, okay, 38. Mid-level Marvel, all right. Fantastic Four First Steps at 37. No way. It should be way higher than 37. It's better than that. So I can just respond to this because I haven't. Hey, what's going on? What's happening here? Black Widow. Oh, okay. Iron Man 3. All right, I think it's better. Than that, but okay. Captain Marvel, I like a little bit. Okay, 34 doesn't bother me in the mid-range. Okay, Captain Marvel. The Marvels is not better than Captain Marvel. It's not. What? That's not. What is this BS? No. Miss Marvel. I like Miss Marvel. I think Miss Marvel was a legitimately good show. I like the family dynamic, but yeah, I don't know. And look, it's not. So I should have used a different browser because for whatever reason, this big. You know what? Maybe I can use a different browser. It's not letting me. It's not letting me use it. I'm going to use. There's a great browser that I always forget to use, but I'll try and use it. Called Arc, and it gets rid of all the ads, so it makes it easier to look at things. Okay, so I'm gonna switch out because this is clearly not working. So let me just switch browsers. Give me a minute, and I'll switch. See, this is why people have producers, because it's hard to Arc. Okay, now I've got to move it over a little bit. Hold on. Okay, and let me just. Okay, now we're back to Arc. So let's go. Let's see what we got. We're at Marvels. No. Miss Marvel, okay. Ant-Man, I like Ant-Man. 31, I guess that's mid. Ironheart, no. I think Ironheart should be... Doctor Strange at 29, no. I think it should be higher, but we'll see. Thunderbolts, all right. Seems all right. Daredevil Born Again, I think it should be lesser. Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man at 2025. I think Doctor Strange, the first Doctor Strange, is better than Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, that seems right. The holiday special, yeah, okay. Spider-Man Far From Home, yeah. Hawkeye, no. Hawkeye should be way, way down that list. It's not 21. Where are people coming from? Wakanda Forever should be down on the list. I don't think it's at 20. Captain America, the First Avenger. I know where we're going, so okay, it's up there, but I like Captain America, the First Avenger. There's no way that Shang-Chi should be as high as it is, and I love Shang-Chi. It should not be at 18. I'm sorry. It should not be at 18, and I love the movie. Deadpool and Wolverine, no. No. This is a lark. It's goofy. It didn't really add to the universe. I mean, it's a great, hey, it made $1.5 billion, so what do I know? Agatha All Along at 16? Come on, people. Who made this list? The Avengers is at 15? No. No. Spider-Man Homecoming at 14? Spider-Man Homecoming is not up above the Avengers. It's not above the Avengers. I'm sorry. Captain America Civil War at 13? No. What the hell? Avengers Infinity War is number 12? Are you kidding me? I think an argument can be made that Avengers Infinity War could go to number 1. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is above Infinity War. No. Now I'm getting angry. Loki at number 10? Introducing the TVA was a huge mistake. Thor Ragnarok? These are... What? Iron Man is at number 8. Okay, I could see that. It should be high. Look, Iron Man can be highly ranked because if it didn't work... Spider-Man No Way Home is a gimmick. There's no way it should be at number 7. X-Men 97 is not in the MCU. It's not in the MCU. Why is it number 6? Why are they counting that? Captain America, the Winter Soldier, number 5. WandaVision is number 4. Now I know why you wanted me to look at this list. Guardians of the Galaxy is number 3. Black Panther is number 2. And Avengers Endgame is number 1. Okay, this list sucks. I'm sorry. This list, I mean, I'm not going to go and re-rank them. I understand where they're coming from, but in doing a ranking of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I would, if I was ranking these shows, what best, the way I would do it is I would organize them by what films most contributed or best contributed to the MCU as a whole. And I would dare say I would put Infinity War and Endgame at the number, or maybe go Infinity War number 1 and Endgame number 2. But I would tie them, and they go to number they go to number 1, because Infinity War and Endgame to me are two of the greatest examples of fantasy filmmaking, and the fact that they work together. Look, the fact a lot of people think Endgame has all kinds of plot holes or things like that. I'm like, I go with it because the what they're able to do in those two movies is insane. That they work, that what they're juggling, and I the time heist, I buy it all. I love those movies. I can watch them endlessly, and they build up to those. That is the greatest finale of the first 23 movies of the first 3 phases of the MCU. I can't imagine. That's like the Godfather 1 and 2 of comic book movies, because they're truly comic book movies. They're not like the Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight movies that are like crime thrillers that are about Batman, but they're very grounded. They're not really superhero movies. I mean, yes, Batman is a superhero, but Nolan's Batman trilogy is not really about superheroes. Batman's a crime fighter. There's very little fantasy in those movies, whereas Infinity War and Endgame are like the level of fantastical in it. It's insane, and it all works together. So in my mind, everything is building up to that. Those are the two greatest MCU movies. And then you have to rank the individual ones. I would say that Winter Soldier, actually I would probably go Infinity War and Endgame are tied at 2. Avengers would be, or tied at 1. Avengers would be 2. And then maybe Iron Man or Captain America Civil War. I mean, Captain America Winter Soldier would be 4th. And then you have to say how did these things add to the MCU, and how effective were they, and then just do it in descending order that way. That's how I would do it. But that's kind of a bullshit list. Thanks for that. I appreciate that. So here we go. Let's see where we got 1001. Johnny has sent in. I'm trying to catch up. You guys, wow, you guys are. This has been a very fun show. I want to make sure I catch up with everybody. Okay, I'm caught up there. So 1001 Johnny, let me make sure. 1001 Johnny says, okay, one. He's got a bunch of these. So, well, of course you can believe Zardoz, Rob, master of fun and wonder, but there are elements in the filming that do not stand out as noticeable. In my mind, there are noticeable effects, as in you notice how they did it, my favorites, and immersive effects. Yeah, it's true. Like, look, what do you say about a movie that has a gigantic floating stone head? But even though it's a miniature, those shots over the opening credits of the miniature stone head are so beautifully shot that you're in. You're in. I'm in. I mean, I'm a huge fan of that movie. 1001 Johnny says, my last two oh wait, hang on. Then he goes on to say, Zardoz, perhaps because of its age, has more noticeable effects. This made me see it as a beautifully shot British theater on film, or play on film. It added to the spiritual themes of the movie, and by making me feel as an out-of-body observer, like watching a stage play. I could see that. I mean, Zardoz is a really weird movie, and but I do enjoy it as a slice of 70s sci-fi, and I think it does a really good job of creating its milieu and the way it's shot. Yeah, Indiana Jake, that list from the MC, that was really pathetic. 1001 Johnny goes on to say, you're bordering on 4 rants, Rob, so I recommend 2 episodes of Ultraman 66. You can find them for free officially on YouTube. Episode 10, an episode I heard someone call, hang on, it's sorry, I hate when it jumps like that. Episode 10, someone call it silly. It isn't, because Ultraman rips a fin off of Godzilla and taunts him like a torero. Okay, I'd watch that. Okay, I'll watch that. You know, it's Godzilla. I love it. Then 1001 Johnny goes on that episode 14, the Pearl Defense Directive, the first episode of the Ultra series to be directed by Akio, I can't pronounce his name, Jisoji, called sexist by modern Western viewers, but this episode is cherished by the lead actress as a charming attempt to explore femininity in sci-fi TV. I'll watch that. Major Chai Chai says, I caught your discussion with Campia as to what other DC characters Henry Cavill could play. Thoughts on him playing Jason Blood? Etrigan? I think that, you know what? I always thought Etrigan as being smaller, but he could play Etrigan. Is that who you're talking about? That would be kind of fun to see him do that. 1001 Johnny says, my last two recommendations, I don't want to overwhelm you too greatly. I offer an episode from Return of Ultraman, Remember Jiro Dan, and the newest Ultraman Omega, both set battles at water. Episode 20 on Prime Ultraman Omega, episode 2 on YouTube. Well, I'll have to check those out, and now I can come back to these and see those. Tom Jr. Jackson has gifted a membership. Well, thanks to that. Darth Plato says that the number one Marvel show is Agent Carter. Was that even on the list? Was it number one? Did I even look at it? Because I didn't see it on the list. Is it? Is it really Agent Carter? Man. 1001 Johnny says, my brothers and I would argue that Iron Man or Winter Soldier belong at number one. Yeah, I mean, I could see that. Winter Soldier could very well be number one. I just think the Avengers movies, the fact that they work at all is amazing. B Thing says, pertinent to nothing, Carol Danvers is truly my favorite superhero, but Jessica Drew, Spider-Woman, is always my superhero crush. Where is Jessica Drew? Jason Webster says, so far the K-drama Moving is categorically the best superhero-themed content film or series of the decade. Nothing else comes remotely close. You know what? I watched the first episode of that. I was very intrigued. I did not watch. I didn't watch the rest of it, but people keep saying how good it is, and I think that. I mean, why not, guys? Girls. Wait. I have to look. No, Avengers Endgame was number one. I didn't see Agent Carter on this list. Is it on this list? I have to go back and look. I'm going to end this show, everybody. I want to thank Mike Boden for being here. I want to thank all of you for writing in great letters. Thank you. I want to thank Sean for his great letter at the beginning that made me get Mike Boden to come on the show. I'm sorry there was some sound issues at first. I should have dumped him and brought him back earlier. I want to thank everybody for this very long show on the first day of August. Thanks for generously supporting this channel via super chats and tips. I very much appreciate that. There will be a member call tomorrow at 11 a.m. So join us for that. It'll be fun. And if you want to write a letter, you can. Remember, put Robservations in the subject. And by the way, for those of you, people keep asking about this, but I am going to pull the trigger on our short story contest. The thing is, I wish I could publish all the short stories, but I can't do that. So for those of you who are going, what are you talking about? For years, I've wanted to publish, well, for my whole life, I've wanted to publish an anthology. I loved anthologies. I love books of short stories. So I've been talking about publishing a short story anthology called The Imagination Connoisseurs. That's going to be the name of the anthology. And the theme of it is going to be stories for, about, inspired by imagination connoisseurs. And they can be anything. But what does it mean to be an imagination connoisseur? What if you are an imagination connoisseur, what's the story that you want to write that shows the world that you are an imagination connoisseur? The book is going to be called The Imagination Connoisseurs, and I'm going to publish it. You know, we're gonna have a contest. I'm gonna have some real writers edit the stories. We're gonna have to charge. Here's the thing. I've been doing some research into this. We have to charge probably an entry fee, which is steep. It's going to be $40 to $50 because I have to talk to the people that are going to edit the stories because I have to pay them to read them. I have to pay the readers. And I know it's steep, but part of the reason to do that is now people can just generate short stories via ChatGPT. Now, I'm going to use, there's certain tools you can use to see if short stories are artificially generated by ChatGPT. I'm trying to avoid that. And making a steep entry fee means that people will, if you're going to submit a story, you better make it good. Otherwise, why throw 40 or 50 bucks away? I can't charge like 10 bucks. And I'm using that money to pay real editors. And then what I'm going to do is once the short stories are ready, I'm going to crowdfund after all the True Noir stuff is delivered. I'm going to crowdfund the book itself, because what I want to do is I want to have a hardcover, slip-cased book with a dust jacket, the whole 9 yards. So you can get, if you want, you can get a digital version of it that you can download. But I want physical media. I want a big, thick, hardcover book. So that's the deal. Right now I'm working on the rules, but I'm probably going to launch it in the next week or two. And maybe not enough people will do it. But we already have, when I announced this before, people submitted stories years ago, which I still have, and those are still in play. And if you've already sent them in, they're still in consideration. But now we have ChatGPT to deal with. So if you've ever wanted to write a short story, the imagination connoisseurs, I'll probably run the contest like up through the holidays, and then we would announce the winners on probably like New Year's Day or something, and then the goal would then we would run a Kickstarter campaign for the book and then publish it. My goal would be to publish the book on my birthday next year, May 15th. That's what I wanted. That's my birthday present to myself. So there you go. The Imagination Connoisseurs, the book. And I'll probably set up a dedicated website for it. And it's going to be fun. It's going to be participatory. And I'm going to share, as we go along, I'm going to share people's work. I won't read the whole story, but I'll and there's going to be some really interesting people involved. So in terms of looking at the stories themselves. So take that as you will, everyone. So we'll do another community project, but I'm going to deliver all the perks for True Noir, which I've been working on. But anyway, there you go. The Imagination Connoisseurs. It's funny, unfortunately, Christopher Roberts, who actually did these pieces of art, the Existential Mr. Rogers and the Sommelier of Sci-Fi, and he did a lot of the work. He did all the pictures of Dieter and I for Let's Get Physical Media. He passed away, and he did a potential cover for the book, and he was going to refine it, and it's really cool, and it could have been the cover of the book, but he passed away, so he'll never get to. I'm definitely going to put that cover, while it probably won't be the cover for the book. By the way, we are going to run a cover contest as well. But that cover contest, you won't have to pay anything to join to enter. But yeah, we're going to do that, kind of like the film festival. But that's a free thing, and we're going to make it, make that into a really cool dust cover and all that. So there you go. Now I got to end this. I can't believe I've been talking for almost 4 hours. But this was a great show, everybody. Thank you. Write in those letters right there. Remember, put Robservations in the subject line first so I can search. That's how I search and find them. And on that note, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I say to all of you, have a better night, and I will see you at the member call tomorrow, if you're members, at 11 a.m.